Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another round of the Next Gen Racing Proto GT3 Championship Season 2, as brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. And today marks round 7 of 10, and with it comes our second endurance race round of the season. And what better place to play host to our endurance race round than the Circuit de la Sarthe, or the Circuit des 24 de Mans, or as you all know and love it as just Le Mans. Getting ready to celebrate its 100th anniversary of the infamous 24-hour race held on an annual basis. This circuit was 33 corners, track length of just shy of 14 kilometres, and indeed plenty of extended straights to go with it. Is a circuit like no other when it comes to endurance racing. With the long straights putting our drivers at the test of running the machines at the highest possible speeds and coming into heavy braking zones which will test the resilience of the best braking pedals, our drivers will need to be on form tonight and make sure to keep it calm and consistent if they want to walk away with the ultimate prize of victory here, and indeed plenty of points that will take them into the final third of the season. But as we get ready to go racing today, let's take you through our schedule. Times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinated Time at UTC. Our schedule is as follows. We've only got one item on the agenda today, and that is our endurance race, and that'll be kicking off in approximately 14 minutes' time. That will be 8 o'clock this evening. 120 minutes of racing action. The grid will be determined by a specific order we'll come to very shortly. But remember, you're tuning in live via free media platforms for your viewing pleasure. Firstly, if you're a YouTube user, you can tune in via the official NXTGEN Racing YouTube channel. Alternatively, if you're more of a Facebook user, you can go to facebook.com/groups/NXTGEN Racing. Or lastly, if you're more of a Twitch user, you can go to twitch.tv/TX141. And I hear you ask, who is TX141? Well, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX141 or Brit of the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on, and I'll be bringing you all your racing action tonight and indeed for the remainder of the season. And what a season it has been thus far, indeed one to remember. Because as we make our way further down the calendar, which you can see on the screen, last time out we were in the United States of America at the Indianapolis Raceway Circuit, and at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the state of Indiana, we saw 2 races that were definitely controversial for some of the incidents that occurred across our GT3, LMP2 and LMDH classes, but the one core ingredient stayed the same, and that is multi-class racing. Definitely delivered the racing action and drama that we come to know and love, and at a very slippery surface at the Indianapolis Speedway, we got to see our drivers there really have to contend with a track that seemed to want to get the best of them rather than them getting the best of it. But that was back at the 1st of March, and as we look to today, of course, after today, we've got 3 more rounds to come, including the return to Italy. A long time away since we returned to Italy, but we'll be heading back to Italy for this season, and it will be at the Monza Grand Prix circuit, round number 8 next time out on the 15th of March. We have the sprint and feature combination, and our final sprint and feature combination will be in our penultimate round of the season, and it'll be the recently introduced French circuit, a circuit de Nevers Magny-Cours, and that'll be on the 22nd of March 2023 before we bring everything to a close in the US of A. Once again, we make our way to the state of Florida for the Daytona Road Course circuit, and there we bring it all to a close on the 29th of March in our final endurance race round of the season. We would take you through the preceding rounds, but we've got to get through things quickly given the racing's not too far away, and as we look to our championship standings, we can see here that going into today, started off with our Drivers' Championship, and with it the gold class for our hypercars, or our LMDHs. At this point in time, Gaz Williams, or Gareth Williams as he's known in full, leads the way, but only by 3 points over Chris Daines and Jamie Dorey. Of course, Chris Daines, for a couple of rounds where he's had 0 scores so far, Readers had to try and make up for lost progress, and made up for it last time out with 2 very strong performances, albeit a feature race that eluded him, giving a spin towards the end of the race, cost him very dear on Tiger degradation, but the win in the sprint race there has seen him move up to 175 points, and with a 3 bonus points set in his favour, Jamie Dorey right now will be looking to bounce back tonight, and Gaz Williams will have to do his utmost in order to keep the pair of them at bay. Benjamin McCluskey as well, he's a bit further back there, 17 points off of the top 3, but you do need to keep in mind that after that win in the feature race, he's definitely still a major threat to our top 3, and could he find himself back up there as well come the end of the proceedings. Craig Jones, EMP 5 on 157 points, is only 1 point off, and therefore the top 5 continue to stay very close, as Magnillon in P6 continues to break away from Rafael DeSantis, who has dropped to P7 ahead of William Foyle there, who was not able to compete last time out. But as we come onto the LMDH Silver class, we can see Paul Williams leading the way here with an absolutely infallible performance last time at Indianapolis, only missing out on a single bonus point from a near-perfect performance, and that was, of course, the fastest lap in the feature race, which went to his teammate from Speed9 Esports of Jochen Siegert. But the gap between the two of them now extended to 19 points, and if Paul Williams continues this run of form, he's definitely setting himself up for major success with a couple of rounds to spare in the closing of this championship. Mark Baker, meanwhile, not in attendance last time out, has dropped a further portion away now. The gap between himself and Jochen Siegert standing at 43 points, and Baker there continuing to hold off Callum Jenkins, with David Harney on 39 points, completing all drives who've got points on the board in the LMDH Silver class, and then Jason Ashfield and Wayne Douglas on 0 points yet to compete. We then come on to the LMP2 class, and we can see in a class that continues to be shaken up left, right and centre. Last time out, it was the opportunity for SCCR SimSports' drivers of Stringer and also Barrie Jarman to shake up the standings, and both drivers there doing very well, with Stringer bringing home the win in the feature race, plus also the fastest laps in both the sprint and the feature race. But meanwhile, Barrie Jarman, the fastest driver in qualifying, taking pole position and also taking the win in the sprint race. But the delta between the two, of course, stand at 123 points, albeit the Jarman joined us midway through the season, and therefore for Kevin Stringer it's a 5-point advantage over Nigel Stock, and now carries his favour, but Stock there looking to bounce back as soon as possible. And we've definitely seen that while Stringer has been the fastest driver in the class, it has been Nigel Stock who's perhaps been the most consistent, albeit Stringer would like to argue he's just as consistent, but he hasn't had the run of luck compared to Stock. But it really does come down to small margins between the two of them. And then Mark Sykes there, MP3, not quite on the pace last time out, of course, nursing an injury, and he continues to nurse that bicep injury going into tonight, and therefore we're going to see him on circuit, but he may be a little bit off the pace, with Barrie Jarman there in P4, continuing to make haste and close up to the top three. David Maggioni yet to get points to the board and yet to compete in a single round of this series. We then come on to the GT3 classes, and we start off with the Gold Drivers class, so we can see Frederick Stensbold Dorey continue to lead the way on 181 points, now to 145 for both Gavin Garner and Russell Fowler. Last time out Indianapolis, it really was for Dorey to continue to eke out that championship advantage, and now with that advantage of 36 points, he really is looking to become the favourite, with Gavin Garner and Russell Fowler both on equal points, and it goes to show the change in fortunes. Garner's had mixed fortunes over the last couple of rounds, meanwhile Russell Fowler's continued to go from strength to strength and is looking to build upon that consistency tonight. And we need to talk a little bit more about the Mercedes AMG Evo as of tonight, and we will do so in the near future because we have seen some significant changes to the GT3 machine as the most recent balance of performance update, but more on that in due course. Magnus Fulton Bukeka, meanwhile, in P4, not achieving any points last time out and falling outside of the top three for the first time in a recent while, but 3 points off of the top three. He'll be looking to get back into the top flight, with Ole Martin Bjort there in P5 at 129 points, really leading the best of the rest pack there ahead of Eric Benson by a single point. We've got to keep our eyes out for Benson, who has been proven to be the fastest man on individual lap pace, but hasn't quite been able to string it together in the feature races, albeit a dominant performance in the sprint race at Indianapolis shows just how much potential he has at his fingertips. Johan Ersson, Stefan Vessels, Ryan G. Walker, and Digan Fairclough not to get any points on the board last time out, with Liam and Ely there, best of the rest outside the top 10 in P11, ahead of Adam Delman and John Higgins Jr. And then we come to the GT3 Silver class, and we can see here in the second of our three GT3 classes, Baz Meacham is still the name that tops the standings, with a growing margin there, and was now extended to a margin of 22 points. Now, the challenge for Baz Meacham last time out was for him to try and turn around that dismal run of form in round number 5, and he definitely managed to do so. His bad luck seems to have gone away, and Ben Bennyworth is now the driver who's in the pressure seat to try and reel Meacham back in, but with Meacham looking so fast, will he be able to do so? Bennyworth, meanwhile, have to keep Ollie Wade behind him, with Wade not getting any points on the board last time out, and Stefan Albanese only a further point behind, with Paul Scott there showing great pace in the feature race and consistency to move into P5, having also picked up the fastest lap in the sprint race. He's 12 clear of Espresso Rien, with Tom Bingham, Jack Barker, Matthew Addy and Aaron Raisey completing the top 10, and then best of the rest Mark Arrowsmith ahead of Brandon Hay to complete the GT3 Silver class standings. Then come on to our final drivers class, and we can see it's the GT3 Bronze class, and Jordan Baybois leads the way once again, returning to the top by a single point over Ingar Almklov. Baybois having a near perfect performance at Indianapolis, only missing out on the fastest lap in the feature race that went to Sean Scooter, but otherwise all the points were his for the taking, and Ingar Almklov will now know that he's definitely in a deadlock with Baybois as they make the way into the latter half of this championship. Elwyn Sykes, meanwhile, in P3, let's not count out the racing team Astra driver, who's got a lot of pace, but Indianapolis seemed to elude him in that regard, and he stands a further 13 points away, with 11 points to Daniel Stimmond in P4, who put together a brilliant performance in the feature race. And keep your eyes out for the Rossum Universal Roberts Mercedes driver. He's definitely a force to be factored into here, with Eric Celestin meanwhile in P5 at 127 points, falling back towards the clutches of Jorge Santos, with Sean Scooter and Artie Chatsconstantou completing the standings, and it was great to see Chatsconstantou back on circuit last time out. We then come on to the Teams Championship. And we can see after 6 rounds of 10, it is Speed9 Esports who continue to lead the way, achieving 82 points, much like SCCR SimSports, and nothing has changed as of Indianapolis other than the total points tags they have both increased. But with the two teams still equally apart from one another, the gap once again spanning to a grand total of 36 points. It's NXTGEN Racing Orange who are starting to fall a little bit further behind, who drop into P3 on 436 points, and now only 9 points clear of their sister team NXTGEN Racing Purple. Team Slow-Mo Leftovers complete the top 5, with their sister team of Team Slow-Mo in P6, a further 2 points off, and it's Racing Team Astra, NXTGEN Racing Pink, DRS Esports and Team Slow-Mo Black who complete the top 10. Performance Link Esports continue to try and push their way back into the top 10, only standing 12 points off in P11, ahead of Rossum's Universal Robots, with Made for Racing and Rocket Racing Stars completed the standings. But we come from our standings, of course, to our circuit for today, and it is none other than the circuit des 24 Hours de Mans, and as we can see here, the circuit located in the region of Le Mans in Pays de Loire of France. It's a circuit like no other as the circuit map from iRacing.com. Thank you to them for their circuit maps and also their wonderful simulator shows. With 33 corners and a relatively low amount of elevation change over a lap, or if there is elevation change, it's typically quite gradual apart from the opening corners. This is going to be a circuit which sees our drivers run 3/4 of the time at full throttle. That means it is a test of machine reliability. It's also a test of braking potential and our ability for our drivers to be consistent on the brakes time and time again. Because they make their way across the start-finish line and charge up through the Dunlop curve of turn 1. They'll head into the Dunlop chicane for the first of many heavy braking zones through turns 2 and 3. Survive that, they'll come down through the kinks of 4 and 5 and into the S's of turns 7 and 6. And as they make their way up towards Chequered at turn number 8, for some it's going to be flat out through there, others it's going to be a downshift and lift, and we'll have to see how they progress it. But as they make their way through the right handle, they'll need to perfect it as they head onto the Mulsanne Straight. Heading all the way down, of course, broken up by 2 chicanes at turns 11 and 12 due to safety reasons, so we'll come into a little bit more about that and the history why the chicanes were added in due course. Our drivers will make their way down towards Mulsanne Corner at turns 14 and 15 before heading on to the run down towards Indianapolis. Charging down the back straight there, we'll see plenty of overtaking opportunities arise as they come trail braking into Indianapolis Corner at turn number 19, and as they exit out, it's the heavy braking zone of Anage that wakes up at turn 20. The slightest corner on the circuit then followed up by another stretch of straightway before they make their way into the Porsche curves of turns 23 through to 26, the Corvette curves of turns 27 through to 29, where it's all about medium speed balance and making sure to use the aero to your advantage, and then they'll head the way into the Ford chicanes of the final 4 corners, always turns 33 to 33, before heading across the timeline to do it all again. And as we come on to our rules for today, let's just remind you, firstly, this is a fixed setup series in general, with setups being provided ahead of each round. In terms of the driver classes, the classes have been finalised as of round 3, and there have been no changes since the previous round. In terms of qualifying, there is no qualifying session for this round, which naturally brings us on to the question, well, how is the grid going to be determined for the endurance race? Well, we can clarify that, firstly, the race shall commence via a rolling start in the designated green flag zone. The driver shall have 3 fast repairs available, and grid order shall be a reverse grid class based on the latest championship standings. So that will mean that the LMDH Gold drivers will start ahead of the LMDH Silver drivers, and then we'll have the LMP2s, and then we'll have the GT3 Golds through to the GT3 Bronzes, and the lowest placed driver in the championship in attendance will start on pole. Conversely, those who are highest placed, i.e. the leader of the championship, will start at the back of their respective class group. A driver shall receive a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 30 or more instant points, and drivers are mandated to make at least 1 pit stop, where drivers must take on fuel and change all 4 tyres at least once. And that does mean we could see quite a bit of strategic variety here, given the fact we're expecting multiple pit stops, much like what we saw in our first endurance race of the season at Road America. But that's enough rules, regulation, everything in between. I know what you're all here for. You're here for the racing. And as we return to our live pictures, ladies and gentlemen, well, we do see Chris Daines there getting it a little bit wrong, making his way on out onto circuit, and we're not quite sure exactly how that's happened for Chris Daines. I think into the pit lane there and a knock to the wall as well. We definitely won't want that to be happening when he goes racing today. But as we do see Magna Yonland, meanwhile, making his way down towards Arnage Corner here, the Team Slow Black driver, knowing that whilst he may not be the fastest in the LMDH Gold class, he's definitely got a lot of consistency at his fingertips, and can the Norwegian find a way to get onto the podium today? We'll never say never, of course. This circuit absolutely unrelenting, and after 2 hours around here, it definitely feels as though you have had a complete workout of car and also driver's physical machinery. But as he makes his way into the Porsche curves here, and coming on through, of course, in our LMDHs, we're going to see them absolutely attack these corners near as close as possible to flat out, and the LMP2s as well, the amount of downforce they're running. As we see Yonland making his way on through and coming into the Corvette curves, we look to other LMP2 machines, and that is Nigel Stock in the number 30. And what's going to be very interesting around here today is we have had a number of recent changes, but the latest update of iRacing that occurred as of yesterday on Tuesday, the 7th of March 2023. We have seen some fundamental changes to GT3 and LMP2 class machinery, and in particular, this whole concept of fuel saving has changed dramatically. Previously, there used to be a technique known as clutch dumping, whereby you could put the clutch of the car in and let the car just roll on the engine, and what that enabled you to do was essentially save fuel before braking zones and even extended straights to an extent. Whereas now the ability to save fuel by putting the clutch in before you get to a braking zone is no longer possible, which means fuel saving is now going to come a little bit more down to lifting and coasting, and also short shifting the car. And also, if you've got access to it, albeit with our fixed setups, I don't think our drivers are allowed to change the fuel engine mode, change those fuel engine maps, but again, as we just said, it may be unlikely our drivers are able to do so. We're not quite sure about how this affects the LMDH class, given the fact the BMW V8M hybrid machines, well, they were not announced announced in the update notes as being affected by the change, but that's one thing that will definitely be on the minds of all drivers. And also there have been updates to how the slipstream works. We have heard that the slipstream is less effective for our GT3s and also our LMP2 machines, and therefore they're not going to be picking up as much of a tow down the straights. And well, with that in mind, it means our drivers will need to be closer if they want to really capitalise on the slipstream. There's also been some very specific changes to the class machinery, which will come until when the racing gets underway. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the checker flag is out on this final practice warm-up session. We are only seconds away of heading to the grid, and indeed getting our racing underway for round number 7, as our drivers all head back to their pit boxes, and they'll shortly be taken onto the grid. Well, as they make their way to the grid then, this is how they line up. We see there for the round number 7, start of the LMDH Gold class, it's Magna Yolland from Team Slow-Mo Black, who starts on pole position overall and in class, joined by Craig Jones from SCCR SimSports on the front row. They'll be followed up by the pair of Benjamin McCluskey for NXTGEN Racing Purple and NXTGEN Racing Orange's Jamie Dorey on row number 2, with row 3 going to NXTGEN Racing Pink's Chris Daines and NXTGEN Racing Purple's Gaz Williams. On then our full row, we have the LMDH Silver class consisting of Mark Baker and Paul Williams, both from Speed 9 Esports, and they're followed up by the LMP2 class, kicked off by Barrie Jarman there for SCCR SimSports, who is joined on the 5th row by NXTGEN Racing Orange's Mark Sykes. On row number 6, we have the conclusion of the LMP2 class, with Nigel Stock the Privateer being joined by Kevin Stringer from SCCR SimSports. And as we come on to the GT3s, starting on row number 7, we see it's Deegan Fairclough, who starts off a pole position there for Rocket Racing Stars, joined by Racing Team Astra's Stefan Vessels. On row number 8, we have Jochen Siegert for Team Slow-Mo, joined by Eric Benson for Team Slow-Mo as well. And then it is the Team Slow-Mo pair of Ole Martin Mjork and Team Slow-Mo leftovers Magnus Björkeka, who line up on our 9th row. Row 10 goes to Performance Link Esports' Russell Fowler, who is joined by Gavin Garner for NXTGEN Racing Pink, with Frederick Stensbold DeRay starting off our 11th row for Team Slow-Mo and completing the GT3 Gold drivers. Following him on his row at number 11, we have Mark Arrowsmith there, starting P22, with row at number 12 going to the silver pair of Matthew Addy and Jack Barker for Maidra Racing. And as we look to row at number 13, it's Espresso Rien, who is joined by NXTGEN Racing Orange's Paul Scott, who will be looking to try and find his way past the Team Slow-Mo leftovers driver as soon as possible. Stefan Albanese for DRS Esport and Ollie Wayne for NXTGEN Racing Purple line up in row 14, with row 15 going to Ben Bennyworth and Baz Meacham. And then we come to the GT3 Bronze class, starting on row row number 16, kicking off with Artie Chats Constanto and Sean Scooter for Racing Team Astra. Jorge Santos and Daniel Stimon for Rossum's Universal Robots line up on row number 17. And it's Elwin Sykes and Ingot Almclov who start on row number 18. And then on the final row of the grid, starting by his lonesome on row number 24, it is Jordan Baybois. In fact, that's not right. That is row number 18. It is Jordan Baybois there who starts on the final row of the grid. But we look to the front of the field, ladies and gentlemen. We are not too far away from going racing. And as our drivers make the way on the ground behind the pace car here, well, it will of course be the LMDHs who start at the front. And in terms of that starting procedure, our drivers will be going green from effectively the exit of the final corner at turn number 33. And what that will mean for our LMDH drivers is they get a clean start onto the start-finish line. Meanwhile, for our LMP2s, they'll be starting in the latter half of the forward chicanes, and our GT3s will be lightly started just as they enter the forward chicanes. So this could get a little bit tricky for our drivers, but they have been warned about it in terms of the difficult start procedure here, and they need to be calm and cautious when the racing gets underway. But I can tell you one thing, of course, calm and cautious will do very well over 2 hours, and who'll be able to find the balance of that between keeping their cool and delivering the pace in order to bring home the race. Well, we're about to find out as the pace car very shortly be peeling in, and it'll be to Magna Jonland to take us away for 2 hours of racing action. And as he makes his way out the final corner, it's lights out and away we go. And Magna Jonland takes us away as he heads up towards the Dunlop curve for the first time of asking. Hitting the firepower there with the throttle immediately. And as they come charging on up the hill, well, Benjamin McCluskey looking for the move on the outside of Jamie Dorey as they break the way into turn number 2. No way through. Chris Daines as well, trying to make the move there on what is Gaz Williams. Can't find it as Mark Baker tucks in behind. Oh, goodness me. And it's gone wrong for Gaz Williams already as he catches the car. Meanwhile, in the LMP2 class, Barrie Jarman's had a great start, breaking away from Mark Sykes a little bit as they make the way down into the S's. And in the GT3 class, where I'm hearing that everybody has survived the opening couple of corners. A couple of drivers have lost places early on, but nobody's been involved in a major incident per se, as we do see a Gavin Garner here under pressure from Stensbold DeRay as they come down towards the S's for the first time. And Matthew Addy there tucked in behind as they come on through into turn number 6. And meanwhile, further back, we see Daniel Stimon in the Rossum's Universal Robots machine putting the pressure on Artie Constanto as they come into turn number 6. And behind will Jordan Bay Well, he's ahead of Ingot Amkov already before the race is effectively made its way through the first sector. But as he comes down into Chequered, of course, this is the corner where if they nail it right, they'll get all the speed. Meanwhile, if they get it wrong, it all loses out in the run down the Mulsanne straight. But meanwhile, we see Kevin Stringer here battling side by side with Nigel Stock going through the first corner. Oh, goodness me, and Nigel Stock in contact there with Kevin Stringer. A nasty bit of contact, and Stock, I think, will need to be towed to the pits for that, or he's going to have to creep to the pit lane. But the worst possible time for it to happen. Meanwhile, in the GT3 Gold class, that's Russell Fowler being attacked by Gavin Gardner, and Gardner makes another place as Fowler's going backwards, not forwards early on in this race. But as they charge their way down towards the second of the chicanes now on the second push on the Mulsanne straight. Of course, the thing about the Mercedes AMG Evo going into tonight is received a noticeable change to its balance of performance in the fact the centre of mass of the car has been raised slightly, and also the overall momentum of the car is more forward facing now with that centre of mass adjustment. The mass has also been brought slightly forward in the car, which means it'll be more prone to understeer but less snappy on that rear end on power. But we'll have to wait and see how that affects the car. Meanwhile, Jack Barker in a free wide as Baz Meacham to the wall there. What on earth has happened to Baz Meacham? We're not quite sure, but it's all gone wrong with the BMW M4 driver. He's having to creep his way on through. Jack Barker minding his own business, and Paul Scott tucking in behind. I think there's a little bit more to that story than meets the eyes. Meanwhile, Ben Bennyworth picks his way on through, but he's got Daniel Stillman behind as they continue to go free wide here, albeit Meacham backs out the free wide, and Stillman here on the inside of Bennyworth in a battle for overall position. This is not class position, we should point out, given the fact that these two, one in the bronze class in the form of Stillman, Bennyworth in the silver class. Stillman on the inside, Bennyworth trying to outdo him on the brakes here, and Bennyworth gets it done for now. Remember, they've got one more elongated straight to go, and Jack Barker immediately feeling the pressure here as they head on down. Paul Scott on the left of your picture in the battle of the Audis. The mate for the racing driver here, I think, going to be beaten to the post into Indianapolis, but he won't be looking to put up too much of a fight here given the longevity of this race. But as he heads on down, meanwhile, we can see just up the road Stefan Albanese right in the toe there. Oh boy, it's Ollie Wayne. That's Ollie Wayne trying to make the move on Albanese. We should correct ourselves. The DRS eSport driver there, covering off the inside as they head into the braking zone. Wayne trying to carry the momentum round. Can't quite find it and has to back off. Meanwhile, the same for Scott versus Barker. Scott on that inside line gets it done. And meanwhile, Sean Scooter going round the outside of Barker, who goes slowly on Apex in Indianapolis as they head down towards Arnage. Well, Barker, I think, just trying to take it safe. Scooter, meanwhile, trying to make as much haste as possible as the racing team Astrodrine knows that he's got some fast flyers coming through behind, including Daniel Stimman and also Elwin Sykes. But as they make the way up towards the Porsche curves, we look back up towards the front of the field, and Jamie Dorey leads the way as he's already crossed the timeline for the first lap and now heads on to lap number 2. So after one lap in the LMDH Gold class, it is Jamie Dorey who leads ahead of Benjamin McCluskey P2, Manley on in P3, just behind there by 6/10, followed up by Gaz Williams P4. Mark Baker, your LMDH Silver leader, follows behind him P5 overall as the Speed 9 eSports driver there has got Chris Daines between himself and fellow teammate Paul Williams, with Daines having a gradual start and making ground now as Mark Baker steps aside with a slow down. Meanwhile, further back, we can tell you that in the LMP2 class, Barrie Jarman at Mark Sykes and Kevin Stringer is your order to complete the overall top 10, with Stringer heading on through there through the Dunlop chicane. Meanwhile, we've got Craig Jones into the pit lane. We're not quite sure why Jones is in. We believe there may be some damage to the car. Dean Fairclough leads the way in the GT3 Gold and overall categories, however, as he heads up towards turn number 2 once again, and further behind, Gavin Garner continues to try and put the pressure onto Magnus Fullerton-Bierkeka as they head up towards turn number 2. And as they head the way up towards the braking zone here, NXTGEN Racing Pink driver in the Ferrari in equal machinery. Of course, all drivers running identical setups. One thing that has recently changed about the GT3s is the ABS system, and more on that in a brief while. To cut that fault off as Paul Williams there, covering off Chris Daines and getting past Daines. They made the way into the first of Mulsanne chicanes, but of course there's a big back and forth here, and all our drivers looking to fuel save as much as possible. And they'll know that they're going to have to make quite a few stops. Indeed, the rumour down the paddock for our LMDH drivers is they're going to have to make somewhere in the region of 3 to 4 stops in order to get to the end of this race. I know some drivers are planning some rather devious strategies to try and make it a 3-stop race, but we saw at Road America the excessive number of pit stops required for the LMDHs as Magna Yodlin there drops to the back of this quartet, and as he comes out of the second chicane, well, it was Williams, they're going a bit wide on corner exit, and in fact Daines, they're going quite slowly. I think Chris Daines' hit was slow down as they make the way up towards what is the right-hander of Mulsanne. But as they head on down here, you can see Yonlin coming on through, and Daines definitely with a slowdown. Meanwhile, we look to the front of the MDHs, and again, Jamie Dorey here under pressure from Benjamin McCluskey as they head all the way down towards Indianapolis. And of course, these two drivers from NXTGEN Racing, they won't put too much pressure on one another. One from the orange team, one of them from the purple team. They're from sister outfits, but at the same time, they want to keep their cool and keep it safe as they head in towards the right-hander. And well, McCluskey staying right there in the toe, not really gaining too much, but I think trying to save as much fuel as possible, given the relative space between them. Meanwhile, as we look from them back to the GT3s, well, here's Frederik Stensvold Dorey, continuing to pick his way up through the order, looking up the inside of Russell Fowler there, can't quite find his way on through as we ride on board with the Audi R8 GT3 driver. In fact, there a slowdown for Dorey as he cut across the apex curve on the exit of the second Mulsanne chicane, and that is going to cost him a huge amount of time as Erik Benson comes on through to retake P7 in the GT3 Gold class, and as they head up towards Mulsanne corner, Gavin Garner behind. I think Garner here will slow down as well, so everybody falling foul of the automated track limiting system, and as they make their way in towards turn number 15, onto the brakes they go, and behind Matthew Addy leading at the GT3 Silver class. And we haven't seen too much of the number 57 driver this season, but he's been able to attend. He's been looking fast in the Porsche 911 GT3Rs. We've got a driver going very slowly there off racing line, and that is Stensvold Dorey, who I think will further slow down, still trying to burn it, and Gavin Garner having to take evasive action as they make their way up towards Indianapolis corner. As they head down towards the next braking zone, of course, with these slowdowns, it does take a lot of momentum and wind out your sails. Only Martin Mjork here won't be worried about the slowdowns at the moment. He's continued to push on as he keeps Chequered behind him. But the Norwegian for Team Slow-Mo here will know that he wants to try and get a little bit closer to Ayrton for the simple reason that he can be in the toe and try and do a little bit of fuel saving and also gain some relative lap time. And we should point out that with the slipstream being reduced on the GT3 and LMP2 cars, what this means in practice is we're going to be seeing less slipstream assisted overtakes. It will be for our drivers, if they get very close, get within at least half a second, they will feel the benefit of the drafts of the car in front on the long straights, but no longer will it be when they get to within a second. You really start to see a pronounced change in the top end speed of a car, and that is the adjustment which has been a little bit controversial to some, but indeed it has tried to make the slipstream a little bit more realistic, particularly for GT3 and LMP2 class racing. And one driver who'll be thinking about that right now is Daniel Stimmen. Has he been able to get the overspeed versus Sean Scooter as they head in towards the Porsche curves? Looking around the outside here, Scooter covering off the inside. It's too wide as they make their way through the right hand, and Stimmen is showing no signs of slowing down as he comes through the left hand. He gets it done, and Scooter goes round and into the wall. The car cuts loose, and goodness me, a little bit of wobble there for Ollie Wayne. The Scooter keeps the brakes on and lets the whole field come on through, and whilst it's frustrating, he has to do this. Of course, there's no way to turn the car around as everybody makes their way charged on through, and Scooter now gets ready to turn the car around after Bennyworth makes his way through. Meanwhile, we look back to another Mercedes driver who's flying much like Stimmen, and that is Russell Fowler here, the Pornsling Esports driver, keeping his nose ahead for now, but as he makes his way up towards the Dunlop chicane once again, it looks like Erik Benson is getting close. It's going to be a question of when, not if, he's able to look to make the move. But as they come out of the corner, we ride on board and look back here from Fowler's machine. And with the recent changes, particularly with regards to what is the aerobalance of the car being moved slightly forward, as well as the centre of mass being raised slightly. The other thing as well, now the Mercedes has been known over the course of this season to be very aggressive on rear tyre degradation. It generated excess heat on those rear tyres. That heat generation has been reduced as part of the model for the car, and therefore we could see the Mercedes now become a lot more threatening in the later portions of the race, and a much more comfortable car to drive for our drivers of Fowler and also Stimmen. And we're seeing that already. Stimmen absolutely flying in the bronze class, and Fowler here continues to try and keep Benson at bay. You can see here Benson getting close in the toe. That reduced slipstream effect not holding him back as he looks up the inside here, up into the break-ins over the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. It's a very long run here as they battle their way down towards the break-in zone in excess of 150 miles an hour. Fowler there covers him off, and as they make their way on through, Benson will have another chance this. He exits out, gets a really nice exit, absolutely hammers the V10 of that Audi, and as they cover through, meanwhile on the rear of the pitch you can see Paul Scott up the inside there, Espresso Rien for P2 in the GT3 Silver class. Just a bit further up the road, only Martin Mjork and Magnus Fullerton Bekeka continue to stay close to one another as they power their way on down. Now as Fowler heads on down here, of course under braking, all our GT3s have also received a noticeable change in their performance, and that is the anti-lock braking systems have been adjusted, and this also applies to a number of other cars in iRacing, but particularly the GT3s, whereby the ABS will now provide a faster response, provide a more natural, controllable response with it, again trying to get as close as possible to that real-world simulation. And what that means in practice for our drivers here is that they'll be able to lean more into the system, so therefore they won't have to brake as early for certain corners. Instead they can brake a little bit deeper and really lean on the ABS system. Of course, when you do lean on the system, it does mean that you do sometimes generate a little bit of excess tyre temperature, and that's something our drivers will need to be wary of. But we can see now some drivers potentially really trying to outbrake one another aggressively rather than trying to avoid triggering the ABS, which is what the previous approach was. You wanted to just stay a little bit shy of triggering the ABS in full, but now our drivers will not be shy of triggering it. But meanwhile, speaking of drivers who are trying to trigger lap times here, we can see Mark Sykes with Craig Jones behind, and of course Craig Jones in the pit lane at the very start of this race after one lap, and Mark Sykes in the LMP2 drive steering clear and falling a little bit off of the pace of his wider LMP2 brethren, and of course nursing that injury here and just looking to get points to the board come the end of today. But as things do seem to be calming down a little bit as we cleared the first 10 minutes of the racing here at Le Mans, we do look from Mark Sykes back up to the very front of the field. It's Benjamin McCluskey now who leads the way ahead of Jamie Dorey. The overtake having happened off camera, and we have had a number of incidents occur early on this race off camera, and we will try to show you exactly what's happened when we do get the opportunity to do so. And as McCluskey makes his way through the first of the Mulsanne chicanes once again, you can see Jamie Dorey and Gaz Williams just behind. The gap between the top three only 1.5 seconds at this point, albeit Dorey falling a little bit more back towards Williams by comparison. McCluskey trying to guide it by himself now, trying to break away from this group. And meanwhile, further back we see Paul Williams there, your LMDH Silver leader, where he does have Mark Baker, his fellow Speed 9 Esports teammate, right behind him, and it's Magna Yonland who's not too far off the pace either as they head up towards the second chicane. But in charging down, this does give us an opportunity to take a look back at a couple of early incidents on the opening laps of this race, including what happened to Mark Arrowsmith, where there was a jump to the pits for Mark Arrowsmith, and I do believe in fact Arrowsmith jumped to the pits before the race started and therefore decided to start from the pit lane. So Arrowsmith decided to go for a tactical decision as we understand it, and meanwhile we did have a couple of off-track style drives early on, but we are trying to get some replay footage queued up for you. As meanwhile Ole Martin Bjork going slowly out of the forward chicanes and releases Magnus Florton Bikeka to P4 in the GT3 Gold class, and will the team slow-mo driver there hit with a slow-down penalty after the forward chicanes to track limits. And meanwhile Russell Fowler continues to keep Eric Benson at bay as Garen Gardner starts to close up to him as they press on to another lap. Charging away out of the Dunlop chicane and down towards turns 4, 5 and into the S of the 6 and 7. Meanwhile, we can see Gavin Gonnan not too far off of this battle either as they pursue P6 in the GT3 Gold class and coming on through. Of course, we did have that major incident between Nigel Stock and Kevin Stringer on the open lap, and I believe we are going to get a replay of that incident very shortly, but not before we take a look here at Ole Martin Muir and Magnus Fulton Bikeka. And this is the two team slow-mo drivers here, both side to side now as they make the way on down. Well, they're going to be bringing in the rest of the cars behind them into this battle, as now Bikeka and Moore have got to decide who's going to take the initiative here. Meanwhile, Benson, he can see an opportunity arising, but in the toe there, Fowler just gained a couple of extra mile an hour as he makes way into the braking zone and looks up the inside there of what is Bikeka, but I think that's more a defensive posture from Fowler, making sure that Benson gets the message, you're not finding the way on through, and Benson goes a little bit deep there at the first chicane as they make the way on down. Now we jump on board with Gavin Gardner and the Ferrari V8 with its turbo here trying to build its way out through the gearbox, but you can see the Audi getting the better acceleration initially, but this is where the Ferrari thrives when it's in top gear, and now it's really able to open the legs up as they make the way up towards turn number 13 as they head towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. Now getting ready to break the way on down here under battling. The Next Gen Racing pink driver deciding to play it safe, as meanwhile we're hearing that Mark Baker's into the pits from second place in the LMDH Silver class. And notice something interesting on the circuit map here whilst we're on board with Gavin Gardner. You can see how the GT3s right now are halfway around their current lap. Meanwhile, the LMDHs by comparison have made their way all the way round and are heading up towards Tetrudge. There was a big question mark amongst the number of our drivers here in terms of when the classes start to overlap with one another. Of course, we did see Indianapolis last time out, it was within the first 15 minutes, but we're not seeing that overlap currently between the main packs of the classes, and it may not happen until after the first stints have been completed when our drivers go on to their second stints today, given the fact the LMDHs are expected to take more pit stops than any other class. But has gone there, getting a slow run out of Mulsanne corner, just tucking in for now and deciding, I think, to play the bigger pitch here rather than go on the offensive too early. Meanwhile, cutting his way up through the GT3 field, trying to get himself back up towards his LMP2 classmates here, albeit 2 minutes and 6 seconds off the leader, Nigel Stock. Now picking his way on past Artie Chatsconstantou as he heads up the inside here, under braking into Mulsanne corner, and will Stock making sure to stay well on the inside, and Chatsconstantou seeing him coming and letting him go accordingly. But as they make the way out, we have an opportunity to take a look back at what happened to Nigel Stock on the opening lap. This was in the battle between himself and Stringer there, it looked as though from that camera angle, Stringer had a little bit of a poor exit off of the Mulsanne chicane and then turned across towards Stock, and Stock being sent to the tyre barrier as a result there. I think Stringer may have just got down the power on the cold tyres, and that's what led to the collision between the two of them. but Stock there really coming off worse for wear as we do return to the live pictures here, and that is the explanation why Stock is so far down now compared to his peers, but still he's got plenty of time to go, and he'll know that he can definitely look to exploit that time. As meanwhile, off camera, we have had a change for P2 in the LMDH Gold class, and that's Gaz Williams who's found his way past Jamie Dorey. But again, there's a lot of strategy going on here, and it does look as though McCluskey is being allowed to run away and have his own race. But whilst this is happening, we do take a look back at what happened to Baz Meacham on the opening lap with that rather strange 3-wide incident into the second Mulsanne chicane. So this was in the run down towards the chicane, and Meacham here swinging to the outside, and oh goodness me, I'm not exactly sure what's happened there for Baz Meacham. He took to the inside there to try and make it 3-wide, given the fact it's getting very crowded, but it's almost as if the car was pulled off circuit by the less grippy tarmac by comparison. But as we take a look back again and ride on board with Meacham, you see that behind Paul Scott. Oh goodness me, there was contact with Paul Scott, and that's what led to it. That's what we couldn't see from the camera angle. Baz Meacham in the end having to take late evasive action. Well, I think Paul Scott lifting off the throttle pouch just to settle his run into the second chicane, and Meacham coming off worse. They're not anticipating it with all the drives around them as well. But I think that explains the story of why Baz Meacham was involved in that incident. And well, to put in perspective, Meacham did have to come into the pits at the end of that lap in order to have repair work done to the car. And we'll answer Craig Jones. We're not quite sure why Jones ended up having to come into the pits at the end of the first lap. We believe, well, it's most likely not strategy. Perhaps it was considered to be a jump start for Jones, and therefore he was black flagged to come into the pits to serve a penalty. But we don't have any information on that other than I think it was a drive-through. In fact, I think we do have confirmation it may have been a drive-through penalty for Jones, and therefore we can't confirm it, but that would explain the story. But now you're looking at live pictures once again, and as the racing presses on here, we have had some further instances. Of course, we had Sean Scooter going around in that battle for the GT3 bronze lead versus Daniel Stimon in the run through the Porsche curves a few laps ago. But meanwhile, we can see here in the GT3 Gold class, we've got a bit of a shake-up here in the Team Slow-Mo group, where right now Eric Benson has been released ahead of Ole Martin Mjorn, with Magnus Floten Bekeke in P4 at the front of this camera shot. And as you can see here, the quintet making the way on down. Russell Fowler and Gavin Garner still at the back of the group for Performance Link Esports and Next Gen Racing Pink respectively, as they all head on through the second of the Mulsanne chicanes. But as they come on through and around here, meanwhile a little bit further behind them, we do have Paul Scott, who is closing on Matthew Addy, making a bit of ground recently, having taken almost 2 seconds out of Matthew Addy on the previous lap. That's gone a long way in giving Paul Scott an opportunity to get closer and closer at every corner turned. But as he charges down towards Mulsanne corner now, well, Mark Baker was into the pit lane early as we understand it, and therefore for Baker it was a strategic call. They decided to bring him in nice and early in the MDH Silver class, decided to go for a different strategy compared to his teammate Paul Williams. But meanwhile, in terms of other instances on circuit, we've had a couple of tracks, and we also did have a bit of an incident for Jack Barker early on, which I think we have got a replay coming up of. In fact, we've got the replay coming now. And this was in the run out of Indianapolis corner, taking to the gravel there and then charging down. In fact, Barker there with damage to the car well before this. So Barker's been involved in some sort of incident, and then Bennyworth having to snap the brakes. So you can see the front damage to Barker's car, and I think a knock to the wall, and in the end the damage just proving unsustainable for Barker, and I would not be surprised if there's a pit stop on its way for him and a fast repair that will come up with it. We're returning to the live pictures, and we'll stay with the live pictures for some time now. We've had a look at some of the key incidents from the opening 20 minutes of racing. And as we do see Paul Scott here chased after Addy. Addy runs a bit wide there onto the gravel on the exit of Indianapolis corner. Into Arnage they go. And the Next Gen Racing orange driver here continues to mount the pressure as he has a bit of a close run out of Arnage corner. Decides to take a tight exit line there. And I think cost himself a little bit of speed in the process, but trying to get a glimpse of whether he can out-accelerate the Porsche in the run up towards the Porsche curves. And will now, with the speed differential of the cars there, Addy not able to carry the speed on through. Paul Scott goes round the inside and gets the move done before they break the way on in, and Paul Scott takes the lead of the GT3 Silver class. Meanwhile behind, Espresso Rien closed up on these two, and the Team Slow leftovers driver from Norway in the 74 Ferrari, he's got pressure boom from behind because that is Daniel Stimon, who right now is absolutely flying for pace for Rossum's Universal Robots. He's got Nigel Stock behind the LMP2 driver, and I think he'll presume that Stock will come on through as they make their way through the Corvette curves here onto the kinks. But as they head up towards the Ford chicanes, the one thing that is definitely ringing true right now is that the Czech driver is absolutely flying, and nobody seems to be able to hold him back in either the bronze or the silver classes as he makes his way up through the Ford curves once again. but breaking his way on down here to complete another lap and got to what will be his 6th lap under race conditions. The 75 driver here pushing on as he comes across the timeline, and meanwhile we've had, oh goodness me, we've had a major incident at the Dunlop chicane, and that is Russell Fowler and Magnus Fulton Bukeka have gone round. I think Frederick Stenspel Dorey, who's just left the scene of the incident, has also been caught up in this. Fowler's got ahead of Bukeka, but this is not the way he expected it to happen, and we'll have a replay of that very shortly as to exactly what happened. In fact, we have the replay now. Was then making the way up towards the braking zone. Bukeka behind Fowler, and I think Bukeka with a slowdown had fallen behind previously. Under braking they went, and I think Fowler lost the car, and Bukeka was so close that he ended up having to also lose the car in order to avoid the contact. In fact, as we take another look back, we ride on board with the Team Slow-Mo leftovers driver. As he came on through turn 1 on the brakes, they went. And there was a bit of contact. In fact, Bukeka, they're tapping the rear of Fowler, and round they both went, and we're just trying to get the throttle down. The difference of the body language of the cars there, well, Fowler just not able to carry as much speed or return to the throttle as soon as Bukeka was able to, and that's what led to the incident. But meanwhile, return to live pictures here. Daniel Stimmen up the inside of Espresso Rien, and he gains another overall position in the GT3 class. Stimmen here really pushing on. He's not the fastest of the GT3s. Our GT3 Gold class drivers, for the most part, are lapping a little bit faster than the Rossum's Universal Robots driver, but still this pace is impressive from Stimmen, and it is going a long way to his success here today. As he heads on down towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, up his inside goes your overall race leader and your LMDH Gold leader, Benjamin McCluskey. Jamie Dorey, meanwhile, starting to pick his way on through us. When we are starting to see that overlap between the classes, it's occurred as the 21 minutes in, and Jamie Dorey comes on through with Gaz Williams behind. And when I had the opportunity to catch up with our driver of Barrie Jarman earlier today, he was talking a lot with regards to the multi-class facet here in terms of when the classes would potentially overlap with one another. And notice now we are only 22 minutes in, and we're seeing the LMDHs starting to really dissect their way through the GT3 pack, but the LMP2s by comparison, there's still at least 3 or 4 laps away from starting that intersection, and that goes to show, much like what Jarman was saying to me, in the fact here a good number of our classes are not going to see one another until they've gone through their first stint as a minimum, and therefore it does change the dynamic compared to what we are used to in all the rounds prior, where we have seen the classes catch up to one another very rapidly. But as we continue to watch the race go on here, that we do look to Barrie Jarman, your race leader in the LMP2 class, with 7.7 second advantage over what is Kevin Stringer. And you see Kevin Stringer in the rear of the picture there, the SCCR SimSports drivers here, P1 at P2. And also Jarman was saying me in the build-up to tonight that he felt as though one of the most interesting aspects of this race would be the setup, because normally when series come to this circuit, they run low downforce setups, given the number of extended straights here, and therefore that enables you to maximise your top end speed versus sacrificing some speed for the medium speed corners, such as the Porsche curves and the Corvette curves later in the lap. But with that trade-off and that top end speed, that's what all the lap time really does come from. But with this being a fixed setup series, and the setup being provided to the LMP2 machines being quite downforce heavy by comparison, what John was saying to me is therefore a lot of the corners here the drivers have had to relearn at SCCR SimSports. For example, Tech Rouge, that would normally be what would be a lift and downshift, has now become near flat out as a result of the extra downforce available to the car. And also the braking zones have definitely changed, some of them changing by up to 100 yards, being able to just abuse the car even more by not carrying as much speed down the straights with that extra downforce being on the fixed setup. Also expected slipstream to play a major factor in terms of fuel saving, and also was the ability to go on the offensive. But interesting thoughts of Barrie Jarman, and right now definitely leading the way, and I think he thinks in control in the LMP2 class. But as we focus here on Ben Bennyworth, who's chasing after Jorge Santos as he comes on through the Porsche curves here, or the Silver P5 driver, sorry, Silver P6 driver we should say, chasing after Santos, and Santos making ground as Bennyworth continues to watch on. Meanwhile, further behind we see Stefan Albanese edging close here to the back of Jack Barker, and Barker continuing to head on around despite the damage on the car. Albanese has already made one pit stop here for DRS Esport, and as they make the way out through the Corvette curves here towards the forward chicanes, I think it will not be too long before Albanese looks to pick his way past Barker. Barker's still trying to get to the end of the first scheduled stint here, so that way not having to reshape his strategy. But as they make the way for the forward chicane, the second part of the chicanes, you can see it on corner exit, Albanese staying close as they head across the timeline and up towards turn number 2. Now charging up the hill here and in towards the Dunlop chicane once again. Meanwhile, Daniel Stimon picking his way on past there. Matthew Addy, who with a slowdown, is being passed by Espresso Rien. That's a change of class position. The G3 Silver class. Rien now up to P2. Addy drops to P3. And Tetrud catching another driver out. As meanwhile, Albanese has found his way past Barker on the exit of the Dunlop chicane. And up the inside there into turn 5. And Stefan Albanese gets the move done there for P7 in the G3 Silver class. As they head on through and up towards Tetrud themselves here. I think Barker may just start to fall away a little bit. That damage really confounding his ability to carry speed. As they head on around here, Chris Daines picks his way on past them one by one. Now the LMDH is well up ahead of the GT3s, but as they come on down, meanwhile just behind there, you can see Baz Meacham inching closer to fellow BMW M4 driver. Meacham in the silver class of the GT3s, meanwhile Chats Constantu in the bronze class. And while I don't think there's going to be too much of a kerfuffle between the two of them, I think they will exchange places. But as they head on down here, we can see Meacham already taking a look up the inside as all the LMP2 drivers into the pits for the top 3. But Meacham now having to back off, not close enough to force the move, and he'll have to wait until the run out of the second portion of the Mulsanne straight. But as he heads on down here, looking for that move sooner rather than later, now trying to get a move on as they make their way up towards the braking zone. And well, you can also see there Barker just staying out of the toe of Albanese, not looking to come back, and Meacham really struggling here to find the overspeed, just not able to get enough as he finally gets alongside here on the inside. It's taken him the best part of the straight in order to get a parity, and as they head onto the brakes here, Meacham's definitely going to take a bit of life out of the brakes and the tyres to get this done. Chance Constantu's fighting this meanwhile as they come on through the chicane, and Meacham goes around the outside, from the inside to outside, and gets it done there, does the Welshman. But I think at a cost here, and Chance Constantu will have an opportunity to come back as they make their way down towards Mulsanne corner. Now will the bronze driver look for it here with Sean Scudder just behind? I think Chance Constantu with that 2-second advantage would be wise just to tuck into the toe of Meacham and not put the pressure on any further. Of course, the thing as a racer is you always want to be trying to fight for position, but I don't think it'll be worth it here given the pressure that is building from behind. And indeed he waits and sits behind there as they exit out of Mulsanne and head up towards Indianapolis. But as they come charging on through, of course you're tuning in to round number 7 of the Proto GT3 Championship Season 2 as hosted by NXTGEN Racing on iRacing. And we are now starting to see more and more pit stops occurring, including Benjamin McCluskey in from the lead of the LMDH Gold class, Jamie Dorey with him. Meanwhile, Gaz Williams goes another lap here as he charges up towards turn number 2. And if you are tuning in right now, we do say hello to you. We didn't say so earlier, of course, because we had a very short run before we got underway with the racing. But we do see a number of you in the Facebook chat in particular, including Katie Eaves. Good evening to you, Katie. Glad to see you're enjoying the racing action so far, and I hope you're doing it well this evening. Indeed, Le Mans has really delivered for us in recent championship series, and it is delivering once again today. As we do see Williams making his way through Tetrud corner, as he comes and charges past the Deegan Fairclough, the 2 class leaders, one in the GT3 of Fairclough, and meanwhile in the LMDH of Williams here. More pit stops are going, including Paul Williams, who's come on in for his first scheduled stop much later. Mark Baker, meanwhile, making the way out to the pit lane. We can see that's McCluskey ahead of Dorey, but Dorey right behind him. As meanwhile, Craig Jones has come through to take P2. The SCCR SimSports driver, of course, into the pits. The race starts this race. And I think for the number 88 driver, if it was a strategic call, and it was an odd one, but I had to wait and see. But I think there was some sort of penalty as a result of that, given the fact it was at the end of the opening lap, or was it repair work potentially? We've never quite had that question answered. But meanwhile, whilst this is going on, we've got further battling further back in the GT3s and the GT3 Gold class. This is Stensvold Dorey versus Gardner as they make their way up towards the first of Mulsanne chicanes. Dorey's going to be on the inside here, Gavin Gardner on the outside. Dorey holding firm on the brakes there, gets the defence pulled off, but as they make the way out now, he's going to run a little bit deep. He's got to be careful there, of course, the track limits. He won't want to slow down, otherwise that will cost him a huge amount of time, but he seems to have survived the slowdown as they make the way up towards the second chicane. He'll get a distant toe over Ole Martin York, but it's not going to be too beneficial to keep him ahead of Gardner. Gardner there really now hammering home the Ferrari, but I think Gardner trying to play the game of fuel saving and tucking behind, because you've got to keep in mind, really this becomes a game of chess on these long straights. You have effectively what are 4 long straights between Tetrud and Indianapolis. You have the first part before Mulsanne chicane 1, then the second part before Mulsanne Chicane 2, then the third part before the Mulsanne corner, and then you have Indianapolis. And Gardner right now, I would reckon, is potentially trying to save as much fuel as possible on these first 3 straights in order to then be able to overtake this very extensible Dorey in the run down towards Indianapolis corner. But of course, now the frustration will be that Ole Martin Mjolker's fallen to win 7/10 here, and the slipstream effect that Dorey is going to be experiencing now as they turn through Mulsanne corner will be much more beneficial, as Gardner gets incredibly close there on corner exit as they power their way on down, heading all the way up through the gearbox. Well, Gardner's got to make a decision here. Does he go for it? Or as we jump aboard here with the Ferrari driver, 5th gear at the moment, let's look to see when he upshifts. Does he upshift to the max? But he does, and therefore he is looking for this move. Dorey comes him off on the inside, and you can see there as they come down. Also, with Jones coming on through, your LMDH Gold P2 driver, they pick the way up through and now return to the racing line. So Gardner there just waiting at bay. Indeed, the whole trio of GT3 drivers mindful of the LMDH coming on through with 30 minutes of this race complete, still an hour and a half to go as they make the way up towards Arnage corner onto the brakes, and the Next Gen Racing pink driver here looking very threatening. In fact, I'd say too threatening there at the quarter apex, and then the back of the throttle off as meanwhile into the pits. From my Conte-proof window, I can see it's Gaz Williams on the lead of the race overall and in the LMDH Gold class. But as they continue to press on towards the Porsche curves here again, Gardner staying within 2.5 to 2 tenths as they get ready for the next sequence of corners. And I think Gardner here really trying to play the long-term game now. And if he can keep the pressure on Dorey, you can see the team slow-mo driver may make a mistake. Well, he's not known for too many mistakes. When he has made mistakes, they have come at the worst possible times. Indeed, flashbacks to the sprint race at what was Fuji International Speedway. But as we do see there, Benjamin McCluskey picking his way around outside to inside. We'll go on there having to back off with what is Jamie Dorey coming on through. And this is the nightmare situation for the LMDH GT3 drivers when they have to pick past one another as they head up towards the Ford chicanes. But meanwhile, Chris Daines just has to tuck in behind, and well, for Daines, you can imagine the Next Gen Racing pink driver, as much as he wants to get through as soon as possible, he's just got to wait. As meanwhile, Gaz Williams is leaving the pit lane, and as he makes his way on through, McCluskey comes on through to retake the lead of this race. Jamie Dorey comes on through as well, and as they make the way out towards turn number 2, it's a Dunlop chicane. You can see that Daines has made it back into P3, really on the offensive here. Gaz Williams, well, what is Williams' strategy here? He's gone longer than everybody else in the LMDH Gold class as Jones is into the pits. That does confirm that first pit stop was not strategic. It was, I believe, a penalty. But Williams now, as he makes his way through turns at 6 and 7 and up towards Tetcheruja 8. Well, Next Gen Racing purple driver, if he has got an ace up his sleeve, he's not showing it right now because he's returned to circuit in P4. Daines has jumped ahead of him, and now the pressure is on for Williams to really enact whatever strategy he's got planned. But meanwhile, as he heads on down, we do look to the LMDH Silver class for a brief moment. Here's your class leader of Paul Williams for Speed 9 Esports. He is 5.5 seconds clear of Mark Baker, his fellow teammate, with the class only comprised of 2 drivers today, and they're running pretty much on similar strategies, albeit separated by 6 seconds now as they come through Tetcheruja. And Baker there having to respect the fact that Ollie Wayne on the racing line, and the GT3 driver that had nowhere to go other than through the corner before Baker could pick his way on around. As they head up towards the turn number 11 on towards the Mulsanne chicane number 1. We do see there what is John Baywatt P2 in the GT3 bronze class just lurking on by, and the Ferrari driver there mindful of the fact that he's got Wayne and Fowler not too far behind as they head into the next braking zone. Meanwhile, we do look to the GT3 Gold class here, and it's the continued battle between Frederick Stensburg Dorey and Ole Martin Muir, with Dorey there trying to go around outside to inside, in fact inside to outside we should say. He gets it done, and the team slow-mo drivers there deciding to swap positions, I would say, as now Gavin Gardner really trying to find his way on through, and he just can't find it, but he'll have the overspeed. He's going to look up the inside. It's a long run to Mulsanne corner, and as they get ready to battle on the brakes in turns 14 and 15, well, Muir here on the outside, you can see that Dorey trying to offer him every bit of slipstream. Gardner up the inside, it's too wide as they enter quarter apex, and as they exit out here, they both survive the quarter. They both give one another plenty of space as they now head down towards Indianapolis, and well, both of them there having to give one another equal opportunity, and Dorey giving them both a little bit of toe in order to get them to fight one another harder. I think Frederick Stensburg Dorey at this point mindful of the fact that he wants to break away and he wants Gardner to fight this as hard as possible, but they're neck and neck as they come through the second kick. But in the end, Muir does back off slightly there and tucks him behind. He looks back on the inside here. Can he make the move into the Apple's corner? No, he's not quite close enough to it. He needed a bit of an overlap, and Gavin Gardner finally finds his way into P6 of the GT3 Gold class after 15 minutes of staying behind for so long. But as they head into our Arch here, of course, our GT3 drivers have got a long way to go in terms of their strategies, and we would expect their first pit stops to be coming within the next, what will be 5 to 10 minutes before we get to see what the flavour of strategies will be. But as we see Oli Martin built now down in P7 in the GT3 Gold class, he has Magnus Flutenberg a further what is 14 seconds behind, and not too much of a looming threat currently. Meanwhile, we do look to your G3 bronze leader, and Daniel Stimon from Rossum's Universal Robots continuing to enhance his lead on that last lap, adding a further second over his advantage to Jordan Beauvoir, who you see here in P2, we should say, what is a further 5 seconds behind as he heads up towards the Porsche curves, and behind him is Ollie Wayne there, the second place GT3 Silver driver. But we talked only moments ago about when the pit stops may start for the GT3s, and we've got Deegan Fairclough who's into the pits of the lead of the GT3 Gold class. I look at my content booth window, and that could be a sign of what is to come. But meanwhile, speaking of signs here, we've had a spin at the Ford chicanes, and that's been Paul Williams who's gone on around, and well, he returns, and Mark Baker is now your leader in the LMDH Silver class. He's only ahead by a second and a half, if that, as they make the way up towards another lap. But the key principle here is we see an early mistake from one of our Speed9 esports drivers, and Will Baker here will just be keeping his head down and thinking if he gets it right, he may be able to pull off victory. Meanwhile, we're hearing the Paul Scotts into the pit lane for his scheduled stop. The first of what will most likely be at least 2 stops for our GT3s, but as Baker there comes close to behind of Gardner, and to put the brakes on there and the lock up on the front left tyre, and that's not what you want in these LMDH machines. When you lock up the brakes, it absolutely takes the life out of the tyre, and of course no anti-lock braking system or ABS in these LMDH machines, as Baker continues to push on here, feeling the cost of that small moment. But as he heads on down towards the first of the chicanes, meanwhile Eric Benson here a little bit further up the road, chased after Jochen Siegert for P2 in the GT3 Gold class, with Stefan Vessels 11 seconds clear of this pair almost now, as they make the way out of the first chicane and down the second part of Mulsanne. And the number 20 driver here, well, it's going to be all about the long game for them, but how long can they go versus Vessels' strategy? Because of course the thing that Vessels has in mind is he doesn't have anybody to work with, so when he feels safe, and he does, he has to do whilst taking time out of his own race. Meanwhile, Benson here in the tow, is gaining a couple of miles now behind Jochen Siegert. The return factor, of course, is that he will be able to save a little bit of fuel rather than gain the time on his fellow Team Slow-Mo driver. But as they head up towards turn number 14-15, we're in the Magnus Flutenberg has been involved in an incident, seen it be towed to the pits. We'll try to get a little bit more on that when we can. But as we see our GT3 drivers moving on here, Benson not closing any further and just staying behind as Mark Baker looks up the inside of the pair of them. As they head on down, meanwhile, we do look to Jamie Dorey in the LMDH Gold class, who's got Gaz Williams with 4 tenths behind him. And as we ride on board the gearbox of the NXTGEN Racing orange driver, we're coming on through our large corner. Jamie Dorey right now focusing on, I think, on what does he need to do to subvert Williams' strategy. Of course, these two, they're great friends of the circuit, but they're rivals on the circuit, racing for sister NXTGEN Racing teams, and therefore it's a full rivalry that's on. Williams, of course, pitting later than everybody else in class, and therefore potentially trying to do one less pit stop by comparison. But as they come through the Porsche curves here, for what it's for them at the 11th time of asking, or rolling the way on through, absolutely flawless in terms of their pinpoint precision from apex to apex. And Dorey here going a little bit deep, in fact, through the exit of the Porsche curves and into the Corvette curves, but it doesn't cost him too much time as Williams just stays within half a second there and continues to keep within attacking distance. But heading on down towards the end of this lap, this is where the self-doubt starts to kick in as a racer, in the fact that you've seen one pit stop, you've seen that some drivers went a little bit longer than you, some went a bit shorter, some went at the exact same point as you, and you start to question, am I on the right strategy? Have I called it right from the outset? And the thing is, you just cannot think about that. You have to commit to your guns, and if you see an opportunity to adapt your strategy to give you an advantage, then adapt it, but otherwise starting to have those wayward falls is not going to be conducive to your race. And as Dorey goes a little bit deep there through the Dunlop chicane, Williams getting a bit closer in the run into the S's here, and I think Williams might be looking for that opportunity sooner rather than later. But will we be able to pick it off here? No, it will most likely be on the run down the Mulsanne straight or into Indianapolis, and he's got to pick the right time, because of course if he overtakes on one straight, he may be passed on the next one. But as they power their way on down towards the first Mulsanne chicane, coming all the way through here, and building their way up through the gearboxes. As we bring up the dashboard here in the bottom right hand corner of your screen for a brief moment, as we just get a little bit of an overlay there, you can see 194 miles an hour before they hit the braking zone of what is turn number 11 into the first chicane, and that just gives you that sense of perspective. I think in fact the dashboard there of Dorey's glitched as he makes his way on down. In fact, I think we do have a little bit of an error with regards to our times in general, ladies and gentlemen. But as our drivers press on through and down here, racing still continues, of course, but it does look as though we have lost our overlay for a brief moment, so we will try to get that back online as soon as we possibly can. But whilst everything is unfolding, well, you can see here we've got with Ollie Wayne into the pit lane, and will give us a brief moment. We should have our overlay back up and running, but a slight technical fault there. Indeed, we are back, and that is Ollie Wayne into the pit lane here, and the Next Gen Racing purple driver comes on in from what was effectively the lead of the GT3 Silver class, as we've also got Daniel Stimon in the Mercedes drivers both into the pits, and it will be the question of who has perfected the strategy and got it right. Well, meanwhile in the GT3 Gold class, making the way out of the pit lane, Jochen Siegert still just ahead of Eric Benson as they head through the Dunlop curve and up towards turns 2 and 3. Into left, into right they go. Both drivers here, Siegert going a little bit deep, but as they make the way on out, now they'll settle down and try to get back into a rhythm. But of course the tyres have lost the temperature. If they haven't changed tyres, if they have changed tyres, even if it's just a couple, they've got to get certain tyres up to temperature. And with this circuit being predominantly what is a right-hand corner circuit, alternatively we can say it's a clockwise circuit, it's those left side tyres that take a beating. But the drivers need to change all 4 tyres at least once. They'll likely split the tyre changes over the pit stops in order to shorten the amount of time they spend in the pits, given the fact they can refuel the cars and have the tyres changed simultaneously now. But meanwhile, one driver who has lost out in all of this, and in fact Stefan Wessels, who we should point out was leading the GT3 Gold class before his first pit stop. He's not leading it currently as he comes on down in P7 there, but we suspect he has changed tyres in the pits, and that would be the explanation as to what has happened, as we see him here making his way through Chequered corner behind Paul Scott, P2 in the silver class for Paul Scott, P7 in the gold class for Wessels, as he comes charging on down. As he makes his way on towards the first of the Mulsanne chicanes here. In terms of pit stops time, we are getting that data feed on through, and indeed we can confirm that Wessels decided to change all tyres in that pit stop. It would seem with a pit stop time of 1 minute 14 compared to everybody else running pit stops in the region of what was around 27 to 32 seconds. So most drivers deciding to take fuel and potentially change 1 or 2 tyres. Meanwhile, Wessels deciding to go for the full set of tyre change as he makes his way on towards the second part of Mulsanne. And well, this is going to be a gamble for Wessels, but of course what he may be thinking is that he can take these tyres all the way to the end of the race now, and he only needs to pit for fuel for the remainder. But definitely a very old school strategy here from the South African from Racing Team Astra, but will it pay dividends? That is the big question. As meanwhile, as he makes his way on down, of course now the challenge will be for all drivers who did not go with that strategy. They'll notice that they've come out ahead of Wessels, and therefore they won't want to lose any time on their respective strategies. And Frederick Stensburg, DeRay and Gavin Gardner continue to run nose to tail as they make their way down towards Indianapolis. And these are two of a good number of drivers here who need to be conscious of the fact every little battle now could prove extremely costly in terms of their long distance run to the remainder of this race. But as they power their way on down and up towards Indianapolis corner here, Garner once again staying well within the toe, but showing no signs of looking to try and affect a pass. I think really trying to pride himself on that opportunity just to stay there and save fuel off his closest rivals. These two are absolutely neck and neck in terms of pace all the way on around. And as we see DeRay making his way out in towards Arnage right now, Garner falling back a little bit further. But meanwhile, speaking of a driver here trying to make ground, Mark Arrowsmith in the 46 Ferrari, inspired of course by Valentino Rossi, as you can see there by his profile image as the privateer makes his way out of Mulsanne corner, tucked in behind Espresso Rien. And as we jump on board with the Ferrari driver, well, Arrowsmith here has not had the best run of luck over recent rounds and looking to try and turn things around. We know he's got a lot of pace available to him, but he just seems to be cursed with incidents and mistakes that put him out to the running. But as he makes his way up towards Indianapolis corner this time, really cutting the apex there, trying to shorten the run and trying to go on the offensive. I think that Arrowsmith here really wanting to get in there to Rian and try and get Rian to make an error. But right now, as they make the way through the left-hander of Indianapolis into our large corner, Rian there holding firm, 3 tenths clear as they break the way into the sharp right-hander, but all over the back of his rival as he gets a really solid run off the corner. And there Rian really struggling on corner exit, taking the tight exit line. Now up through the gearbox they go here, and Aerosmith of course holding racing line. Rian covering him off as much as possible. He's getting closer and closer within a tenth now. Aerosmith switches back to the inside. He's going to be brave if he wants to get this done. He looks up the inside under braking. Rian goes a little bit deep on the outside. It's a mistake from Rian. The two come together, and as they make the one through, Aerosmith backs off the car there, and as they come through the double left of the Porsche curves, making their way through it side by side into the Corvette curves shortly, thanks to the Porsche curves, and Aerosmith gets ahead in an absolutely brilliant bit of bravery there. Rian did everything he could to defend, but I think in the end a small mistake from Espresso. Rian was delivered, but Aerosmith's gone wide, and with that, that could be a slowdown penalty he'll have to take, and he'll be absolutely kicking himself for that if so, as they make the way down towards the Ford chicanes, because that will cost him at least 3 seconds, and he'll have to find all that time again. As you can see, they're just behind Matthew Addy now, closing up to the pair in the battle for P4 in the GT3 Silver class. I don't think it is a slowdown for Aerosmith, in fact, as he makes his way up towards turn number 1. Albeit I think he is serving a slowdown there. He's trying to do it as covertly as possible, not to lose the place, but he is losing the time. And as they make the way into the Dunlop chicane, Aerosmith defends on the inside to outside here. Rian looks around, and as they make the way back onto the power, Addy gets into the fight here, and the Porsche driver comes on through as they go 3 wide for a brief moment, with Gaz Williams cutting up the inside of the pair, and Aerosmith defends hard here into the S's. He does not want to let this go. He's fought hard for this, and he feels as though he deserves it, and I can't blame him for it. But at the same time, number 46 driver is definitely right now calls the Constantino as he runs wide at Tetra Rouge, and that's only going to hurt ever more, as he will need to take a further slowdown there if he is adjudged to gain time. And if Aerosmith there stepping completely off the racing line in order to let Jamie Dorey through the middle of the group, and Aerosmith losing time there as Matthew Addy now picks his way to the inside. Addy gradually getting ahead. Aerosmith being really clever with how he's serving these slowdowns, however barely losing any time in the overall standings, but he is losing place, and Addy now battling on the inside here. Aerosmith trying to outbrake Addy, and he gets it done. Does Aerosmith a nice defense there from the Ferrari driver, but a little bit of a wobble there at quarter 8. Oh goodness me, and it's all gone wrong for Aerosmith. He finds the tyre barrier there on the exit of the first bowls at chicane, and I think just with the weight transfer in the end, the car became unsettled, and it's all unfolded in disaster for the 46 Ferrari driver. But meanwhile, further back, we can see another battle brewing here between Jack Barker and what's Ingot Almklov in the battle for overall GT3 position. And Almklov here under pressure from Barker as they make the way out of the first bowls as chicane. And as we do say hello there to one of our GT3 legends, of course, and then one of the big names from the original season of the Proto GT3 Championship, none other than Tristan Dino Brega in the YouTube chat. I hope you're doing well, Tristan. We do miss seeing you on circuit. Jack Barker here battling side by side with Almklov. It's going to be a battle on the brakes here into the second chicane, and with Barker looking on the inside, and the two of them literally only hairs width between them. Almklov opens the door up here. I think he wants Barker to take a bit more of a racing line so they don't hold one another up too much, but Barker gets the move done for Made Racing there and moves up to P32 overall. But as we said earlier, it's only a change of what is their overall position, not class, as we hear that Mark Aerosmith has had to be towed to the pits with damage to the car. But as they head up towards the next corner of Mulsanne, meanwhile we do look from them to Deegan Fairclough, your leader in the GT3 Gold class, who's been a bit of an instant quite recently, and you can see the damage to the rear of the car. I think for Fairclough he's gone on a round somewhere, and indeed we have a replay coming up to explain what happened. Well, it's not going to explain everything, but it was a spin for Fairclough. But he's got the damage on the car beforehand, and then just a small glide towards the wall there, coming out of the Porsche curves. Well, the Rocket Racing Styles driver could have that go far, far worse. And, well, as we return to the live pictures, and Fairclough leading the way in the number 87 machine, and Vessels, of course, trying to pick his way on through. And we should clarify earlier, when we said that Vessels were leading, we actually meant Fairclough was leading the race before the pit stops. But Vessels was showing race leading pace, potentially a bit further down the order. But meanwhile, coming into the pits for what will be his second pit stopper today, Chris Daines comes in again here, and well, that'll release Benjamin McCluskey on through, and well, we have seen Daines pick his way up to the lead of the LMDH Gold class, and now the Next Gen Racing Pink driver will be thinking about how he can get it done once more here, as we're 50 minutes into this 2-hour race. We're not quite at the halfway point, but as time trickles on, strategy definitely now becoming a bigger and bigger factor. But as we look here from our LMDH driver who's in the pit lane to our GT3 Gold drivers who continue to battle the way and are not due to come into the pit lane for a long period of time, with Eric Benson versus Jochen Siegert, the two team slow-mo drivers, one of whom from leftovers. That's Jochen Siegert, if my memory serves me correctly, and as they make their way into the first of those chicanes. Separated by not too much. I think they're both trying to work together here and try to gain some time versus Deegan Fairclough, as meanwhile Gavin Gardner has found his way past Frederick Dorey, and what we can see here a bit further back, that gap now open up for Gardner as he's found the position. And well, we believe that Dorey had a slowdown on the exit at Chequered corner, and that's what's led to the gap becoming so pronounced so soon, with the two of them being so even on pace for a long time. But as they make their way down towards the second chicane, I think Gardner at this point may be starting to smile a little bit, because he's had to really push to make this move happen. Meanwhile, speaking of trying to get moves to happen here, we do look to Matthew Addy, who's chasing after Espresso Rear, and in fact we jump on board with the Porsche 911 GT3R driver. Now building his way up towards top gear. Of course, the one thing the Porsche is not strong at compared to its peers in class is straight line speed. It's not even the weakest in class over the course of this season, and in the toe you can see there very gradually gaining on rear, but only by small margins until he gets in 2.5 tenths. Then he starts to gain considerably, but as they make their way through the first of the chicanes here, Addy really having to battle against the elements of the guys. Chris Daines behind. Daines will go on the left of your picture very shortly. That's the LMDH Gold driver who picks his way on past there, and recently come out the pit lane for his second pit stop, but Addy losing a whole half a second, if not more, and now really it's just going to run to the distance here, because Addy will not have the toe available to him in order to close up and mitigate that straight line speed. But as he heads down towards the second chicane, he'll know that he'll have to do it all on the exit of Indianapolis, where the Porsche will enter its element, and there's a lot more speed available. But just look how wide he opens up the corner there before breaking into the second chicane. And I think our drivers are having to be conscious of the bumpy road surface and also the grass on the right hand side, and making sure not to touch the grass in particular. But as he heads down towards Bolzan, we're already taking a temp out of rear, and that's the difference through the corners. The Porsche can just make the gap up in the capable hands of Addy. Making their way down towards Mulsanne corner, things have spaced out a little bit outside of what is the GT3 Gold class in particular, albeit one driver who continues to find himself in a bit of action is your GT3 Bronze leader, and that is Daniel Stimon, who is joined by your Silver leader, the GT3 class, of Paul Scott behind. These two running nose to tail at the moment are really in a different world of pace compared to their class peers as they head up towards turn number, what is there, 20 at Arnage corner. As they make their way through the right hander, Stimon definitely right now really putting together a superb race and not able to be touched in terms of pace. Although I say that Jordan Benoit now 5 seconds off of Stimon, and the pace has started to match up over the last couple of laps, so perhaps we shouldn't be seeing Stimon's praises too high just yet, as it does look as though the Frenchman here, of course, after a brilliant performance last time at Indianapolis, he was so happy with his performances at Indianapolis, as we heard in the post-round interview. Well, the 64 Ferrari driver here, he could be looking to build up to a win here, given the fact he is closing little by little as he heads up towards the Corvette curves. We're coming on through and into the aforementioned corners now. We do look from here back up to the pit lane, and in fact drivers left the pit lane just recently. He's your LMP2 leader, and that's Barrie Jarman, the SCCR SimSports driver here, who everything is working out as planned so far, and really now finding himself coming out in amongst all the GT3s after the pit stops. But meanwhile, speaking of GT3s changing position, here's Jochen Siegert, who's just been passed by Eric Benson in the run through the S's, and he's let his teammate go, and Benson now being released to try and run away with this battle for P2 and to hunt down Deegan Fairclough, who just seemed to be in a world of his own at the front of the field. With 8.5 seconds, of course, and still just over an hour remaining, we have already seen that Fairclough has been involved in some degree of an incident, and it has led to some damage on the car, and a further incident after that. Indeed, anything can happen here until the checkered flag waves, and that's something that all our drivers will be hoping for if they're a bit further down compared to where they expected to be in this race. Meanwhile, Magnus Jonland here, well, he's ahead currently of what is Chris Daines, albeit a pit stop down compared to Daines, as Daines tries to fight his way past what is Daniel Stimon, and well, the LMDH Gold driver has been separated by GT3s no longer, as the Team Slow-Mo Black driver now has the pressure. And does he try to keep Daines behind, or does he let Daines go, knowing that it would not be in his strategic court to fight this too hard, given he is a pit stop out of sequence? Paul Williams behind there. And we can see that Williams has yet to take his second pit stop as well. So Daines really on an aggressive strategy compared to his peers. And as they come out of the first bowls, then Chicane, powering the way on down. And we can see Daines getting closer and closer within 2 tenths now as they make the way halfway towards the second chicane. 1.5 tenths, he gets ready for that braking zone soon. They'll be charging down at 180 plus miles an hour as they head onto the brakes here. And who is going to be holding firm? I think both drivers there stay in their positions. I think Daines recognising that this is the time to fuel save and look for the move in the run to Indianapolis, because that's the final straight and that's where he can make ground and also save some fuel along the way. As they head up towards Molzak corner, Stefan Vessel's just steering clear on the left of your picture in the Racing Team Astra Audi GT3 as they head up towards the turn 14-15 complex. Daines looks up the inside this time. Jonland does not fight it, and down Daines moves back up to P4 in the LMDH Gold class, and his next target will be Jamie Dorey, who is 35 seconds up the road. As they exit out and now head up towards Indianapolis curve, Paul Williams just behind there for comparison. Mark Baker having already taken his second stop, so Williams going longer compared to his Speed 9 eSports teammate and rival here today. It'll be interesting to see how their strategies overlay on one another, because I think given the current set of pit stops, this really does commit our drivers who've made 2 stops already, 2 stops on schedule, we should point out, to what is a 4-stop strategy compared to some who may be trying to go for the 3-stop. But as we see Williams getting closer and closer to the back of Magnus Jonland, we ride on board here with the Speed 9 eSports driver, and well, this gives you a sense of perspective from what is a very tight and narrow cockpit as he powers his way up through the gearbox once again. We're on the roll bar of Paul Williams' machine, the 36 car here building his way back up through the gearbox into 6th gear, and as he gets ready for the Porsche curves, let's just listen into that commitment. Absolutely phenomenal driving there from our drivers, not just Williams but also Jonland in front. It just gives you a sense of perspective there as you listen in, and the fact a lot of these cars, they're just balancing the throttle rather than doing too many gear shifts or attempts on the brakes. But as we see, Jonland and Williams both make the way into the pit lane. Williams goes a little bit deep. He's got to be careful, of course. Doesn't want to run that too wide, but he gets the car stopped in time for the pit limiter line. But both of them going as far as the fuel tank and the tyres will allow, and well, that will be their second stop on the cards. But meanwhile, coming on through to take what will be a P5 in the LMDH Gold class, but keep in mind he is a pit stop out of sequence here. The SCCR SimSports driver of Craig Jones in the 88 machine, and had to come into the pits at the very start of the race after the opening lap, and we believe that was some description of a penalty, because we did see damage on the car, but again we may not have seen it. But as he heads out of the Dunlop chicane, Jones right now really battling to get back into the race, and particularly versus Magnus Jonland as he makes his way into the S's of the battle for P5 in the LMDH Gold class. As he comes on through and up towards Techerouge, we're definitely seeing a continued calm down of the race now. We haven't got too many battles at this time. Really, it's strategy that does now play into the thoughts and minds of our drivers. And as we do look from Jones to Chris Daines, who's running P3 in the LMDH Gold class, we'll now have the opportunity to catch up with Chris Daines in the build-up to tonight. He's talking a little bit to me with regards to the strategy perspective of this race. He was saying that this is going to be a very tough race for the LMDHs on fuel in particular. And the reason being, in this race, our drivers in the LMDH Gold class are limited to 80% of their maximum fuel tanks. That's over the course of the entire race in terms of when they refuel the car, they can only refuel it to 80%, not the full amount. Now in turn, what that will mean is that that's going to most likely lead to most drivers needing to make more than 3 stops, because to do a 3-stop strategy, you would need to save a lot of fuel to really extend out the fuel tank. And given the fact that 80% means that our drivers are not expected to do more than 6 to 7 laps on a single tank of fuel, therefore that leads to those extra pit stops. Because keep in mind, as we're only a minute away from the halfway point of this race, our drivers, by the time they get to the 1 hour mark, in Gaz Williams' case, we will have seen our drivers do 17 laps. So in an hour, that's 17 laps. If you do the mathematics and double it, that's going to be 34 laps, and 34 divided by 7. It doesn't go precisely, but it's just shy of 5 rounded up. So in turn, that means you would expect our drivers to make 4 stops as per Daines' observation. But if anybody can get rid of an excess stop, well, it is going to save them a lot of time on the circuit. But how much time will they save versus how much time do they lose on pace by fuel saving? That is the challenge. Now, Daines was saying it's not just about the fuel conservation, therefore, although fuel saving is going to be important, it's also about tyre preservation, something we have seen, of course, them struggle with in more recent rounds with some lockups and circuits, and Indianapolis not being exceptional. So we saw a Fuji in the season opener, and he was saying about the fact that he wouldn't be looking to push at the start, but he does want the fastest lap of the race as well in order to get the bonus points and really close in on that championship lead. And given that the current fastest laps, it is Chris Daines who owns the fastest lap by 2/10 over Gaz Williams. In fact, yes, it is over Gaz Williams as we check all of our data. And speaking of Williams and Dorey, they're both into the pit lane for their next round of pit stops. So Daines really pushing on here, and he's looking to win. That was the other thing he said, and therefore execute caution early. We did see a couple of wobbles early on in the race for Daines, but more importantly for Gaz Williams. So Daines is having it all work out so far, but is it going to work out as he heads into this final hour? That will be the thing that is on his mind. As he heads on through the 4 chicanes and up towards another lap. Will Williams in the pit lane, Dorey in the pit lane as well, both up on the jacks there and having some tyre changes made as Williams comes down off the jacks. Meanwhile, where is Daines? Daines comes on through here, and it will be Daines who retakes the lead of this race. Williams not too far behind, but Benjamin McCluskey comes on through to retake P2. So Daines and McCluskey here really pushing the tempo, but again, Williams may be playing the longer strategy here, and that is something that we have to keep in mind. Also, it does look as though Jamie Dorey has now started to move more to a strategy much like Williams, and that could prove pivotal here, where we could see the P3 and P4 drivers inch their way back into contention by being on a slightly different version of the 4-stop strategy, or if they're able to convert it to a 3-stop with this time, then it will be a huge time save. But at this point in time, I reckon they're all on 4 stops, albeit Williams on a much more conservative 4-stop, where perhaps he'll be saving time in the pits as time goes on. In fact, that is articulated in his pit stop times, where he's matching Daines and McCluskey in terms of their pit stationary times. All 3 drivers on 25 seconds last time out. Daines, in fact, 24.78 seconds, 3/10 faster compared to McCluskey and Williams. But the point being, they're very similar on stop times, and therefore it is all coming down to how those stops are playing out in practice and the pace they deliver from stop to stop. But meanwhile, as we look back to the LMDH Silver class here, where it's Williams ahead of Mark Baker, as Magda Yolland has come back out ahead of the pair, and Williams here cutting his way up through the GT3 traffic. In particular, Paul Scott and now Daniel Stim on the GT3 Silver and the GT3 Bronze leaders respectively. And as they make the way towards Tetra Rouge, Williams on the inside here. Meanwhile, Mark Baker just staying behind, playing the safety aspect there and deciding not to put too much pressure onto the GT3 trucks. Do keep in mind in multi-class racing, the standard rule applies, which is it's the faster class the driver who needs to find their way safely past the slower class. The slower class is not expected to make a sudden deviation from the racing line. They're expected to hold a natural racing line and let the faster class find their way on around. And whilst they make their way down towards the first of Mulsanne chicanes again, we do look from them to what is your LMP2s, and in particular to Mark Sykes in P3 in the class, who continues to fight on here, falling away from Street Jarman in terms of pace, but at the same time, given his relative injury that he's been taken into today, I think for Sykes, he'll happily take a P3 in his stride, as meanwhile Nigel Stock in the pit lane, he's just leaving the pit lane in fact in P4, and effectively half a lap down at this time, and still trying to get back into the hunt for a podium finish. But as we see Mark Sykes making his way up towards Mulsanne corner. Meanwhile, we do look to Jorge Santos, who quite recently has dropped to P6 in the G3 Bronze class, being passed by Jochen Siegert, and we believe there was an incident involving Santos over the previous lap, and in fact we do have a replay of what exactly happened. So as he made his way up towards the forward chicanes here, under braking, gets it hooked up on the first apex, second apex as well, onto the brakes again, and I think the rear of the car just carried a bit too much speed and therefore goes round and stops it just in time to avoid the tyre barrier there. A good catch from Santos, but he'll be a little bit frustrated as he had to return to the race there, and will with it lose quite a bit of time and lose the place to Sean Scooter after all the progress he'd made. But meanwhile, we look back to your live pictures now, and we see Scooter here battling side by side with Magnus Fluet and Bikeka as Nigel Stock goes round the pair of them 3 wide there down the Mulsanne. And, well, the two are in contact once again, and I think the two drivers, they're getting their elbows out as Scooter goes a bit deep. Meanwhile, we see Bikeka trying to go round the outside to inside of corner exit, and as they make the way up towards turn number 13 very shortly, well, they charge their way up through the gearbox. It's going to be the top end of the Ferrari versus the top end of the BMW. It's the V8 turbo versus the 6-cylinder 3-litre turbo, and well, whether it's the Italian stallion or the German efficiency machine, both of them here very close to battling onto the brakes now, but it does look as though Bikeka just finding a slight nose ahead, if that, but Scooter's not going to let this go. They turn it, and in the end Scooter does have to let it go as there's just not enough room to make it too wide all the way through the initial entry apex, and the Racing Team Astra driver falls back there with Jorge Santos right on his 6 now as they make the way up towards turns 14 and 15 as they charge down towards the Mulsanne corner. 55 minutes still remain. We see Deegan Fairclough on there saying to the YouTube chat, I have so much damage on the car, and well, still leading the race quite comfortably with what is a 9.5 second gap, but the damage we did see on the car is starting to accrue. And well, could that be a sign of some foreshadowing? We do not know, of course, as our drivers make the way on, because we don't wish any of our drivers to get it wrong, but when there is damage on the car, it's something you have to factor in, and those fast repairs become ever more pivotal. But as we see, Scott here continues to keep Santos behind for now and staying in the tow of Bikeka in front. Well, the G3 Gold driver Bikeka is trying to break away here. He's a long way off his peers. Russell Fowler is his next target, albeit Fowler the best part of what is a minute ahead of him as they make the way in towards Indianapolis. And right now it's all about getting to the end and seeing if you can pick up any places in the process. But as we do see the number 9 driver making his way up towards turn number, oh goodness me, the numbering system here, turn number 20, and Arnage, and as he exits on out here, we should really use names rather than colours. We see a mistake there for Jorge Santos going on around. Meanwhile, we do look to what is Baz Beecher picking his way around the outside of Ben Bennyworth, and Bennyworth there with what is a slowdown penalty being served in the run to the forward chicanes, and will now Bennyworth relinquishing what is P6 of the silver class as they head up towards the Dunlop chicane once again. They're heading on up the hill and in towards the braking zone. Meacham knowing that this is not going to be the result he wants so far. He'll want to get plenty more places before all is said and done. But of course that early pit stop cost him dear with the damage he picked up on the opening lap, and therefore this is all about damage limitation. But he is making a lot of ground, it should be said, Meacham. He's up to P6 and 42 seconds off the leader with Paul Scott, and whilst, unless there's going to be some mitigated circumstances or extenuating circumstances that would see him take the win here today, I think it's quite possible that Meacham could be battling to finish P4 come the end of this, given that Espresso Rien is only what is 9 seconds up the road, yet to take his second stop, so effectively on now stop parity with Meacham, who's only made 1 scheduled stop, and the pace of Meacham is 3 seconds a lap faster than Rien, and what is 1.5 seconds a lap faster than Matthew Addy, who's in P5 on average. Meacham is flying here. I don't think he's got the time to catch up to Albanese in P3. Given that Albanese is running slightly faster pace than Meacham, I think that will tell a story of its own kind. But right now, the Welshman definitely in the hunt on a P4 finish as he makes his way out to the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. But as he comes charging on down, of course, when we give credit due to one flying force on the circuit, we must also give credit to another one in the form of Daniel Stimon here, who in the Mercedes AMG Evo 2020 machine continues to lead the bronze class, albeit by 6 seconds, but there is equality between his pace and Jordan Baywar's pace. The two of them exchanging lap times. You can see them both in the picture, separated by your silver class leader of Paul Scott as they make the way up towards Indianapolis corner, and well, it could go either way right now, and I think it will be small errors and gaps in terms of pit stops that will make the difference. And it does look as though the majority of our G3 class are trying to go for 2 scheduled stops here today, as Jorge Santos has come into the pits and just left, taking some repair work to the car and deciding to call his second pit stop early, given the spin at Arnage corner that we saw only moments ago. And still in there, goes just right through Indianapolis corner into Arnage now, and as he comes down onto the brakes here, will the 75 driver really enjoying the feel of the Mercedes as he heads on through towards the Porsche curves. But as we look from him to P4 in the GT3 Gold class, here's Gavin Gardner, but look who's caught up behind, and in fact over the last couple of laps he's taken 7 to 8 tenths a lap out of him, and now getting close here. I think the status quo will resume in terms of they'll run nose to tail for a brief while. That is for Nigel Dorey, who's chased down this P4 finish in the Gold class of the GT3s. They're exiting their way out of the final corner and onwards towards Dunlop Curve, heading on up the hill. Well, you can see here, as I do believe we have one of our admins in the Next Gen Racing Facebook chat cheering on the one-armed bandit Mark Sykes, who's racing on in P3 in the LMP2 class and continue to try and fight off that podium finish ahead of Nigel Stock. Well, we see Gavin Garda here breaking a bit of pace versus Nigel Dorey, as Dorey there having a slow run through the Dunlop chicane, cost him dear. Meanwhile, we look back to Magna Yonland, who in turn, with Paul Williams and Mark Baker behind, he's not battling for his class position versus the other two LMDH drivers, but he is battling for overall position, and that's overall P5, as Williams and Baker get ever closer as they make the way out of the first of Mole's End chicanes. As they power their way back up through the gearbox here, well, Yonland with a slow down there, and well, for track limits, we didn't quite see where he breached the track limits, but he has been decided to have breached those track limits, and now Paul Williams and Mark Baker will just carry on. But Craig Jones here will look at this, rub his hands together and think, right, now I can get back into the race for P5. And as they head down towards the second chicane, Jones here, I think he's going to have a bit of an easy time with this, and he will have an overspeed under braking. Up the inside he goes, and the SCCR SimSports driver gets the move done. But now as he makes his way out of the chicane and down towards Mole's End corner, has he got enough of a gap here to feel safe by the time he heads for Indianapolis? Because of course it's one pass made, but we've still got 2 long straights to go, and when the straights are this excessively long, well, the driver behind you just passed will be right back there with you if you don't get it an absolutely perfect exit. Over the right hand, and Mark Baker has gone on there, and we can't quite see where Baker is in the view. In fact, you can see him there, the rear view picture, gone to the gravel, and that's a lock up into Mole's End corner, carried too much speed, and will in the end only stop in the car before he managed to hit the wall. And Craig Jones here has broken away from Yonland. I think the yellow flag there for Baker being off may have just slowed the both of them down, and therefore Yonland not able to make the counter attack this time out. Craig Jones up into P5 in the LMDH Gold class. We're making the way down through Indianapolis and into our arch once again. Meanwhile, Mark Baker having a rare error there. And what exactly happened? Let's take a look back. We're right on board here with the Speed 9 Esports driver, 7th gear, coming into the kick of 14, onto the brakes he went. And in the end, it was a lock up on the front left tyre and the rear left release. That's what sent the car on around, it would seem, and also having to be wary of potentially making contact with his teammate, but not doing so in the end. And will Williams and Baker, the gap now opened up to 8 seconds, given Baker's mistake. And as we return to the live pictures here, the racing continues, and meanwhile, looking for our LMDHs to our GT3s, Stefan Albanese continues to chase after Russell Fowler, and well, maybe for overall GT3 position, but regardless, Albanese here started to get a bit closer to Fowler in that last lap, taking 2 seconds out of the Mercedes driver. And as they power their way down towards the second of the chicanes very shortly, of course, the main thing that'll be on their mind, in fact, coming into Mole's End corner there, the thing that'll be on their minds now is when does that second stop come into practice? As we hear that Mark Baker's into the pit lane, but I can see him out of my commentary booth window. He comes in for his 3rd and penultimate pit stop, indeed commits to that 4-stop strategy. And when Baker pits, normally we do expect the majority of our LMDH field to start pitting about 2 to 3 laps later, and then Gaz Williams will likely pit a lap after they do. But meanwhile, Albanese here will have on his mind now in terms of when does he go for that pit stop. We do want to remind you that Stefan Vessels in the GT3 class is the only GT3 driver who has taken a full set of tyres in his first pit stop. Everybody else, they change tyres, it'd only be 1 or 2 to match with the fuel they put in the car. But Albanese then looks the inside versus Fowler, and Fowler leaving the door open, expecting Albanese just to take the race in line. But Albanese flashing his lights there, I think trying to say to Fowler, look, well, you've cut off my nose. And I think Fowler would be saying in return, well, for you to come from that far back, I did expect it. But as they power their way on down, we say hello in the Facebook chat there to Lee Horn, who's cheering on Mark Sykes as well. And as our drivers make their way through the right-hander of the Porsche curves here, Albanese definitely now started to get a little bit feverish with regards to try and make another overall position here. Then chase down Ollie Wade, who is a further 18.5 seconds up the road. The Mercedes drivers definitely enjoyed a good run of form here, and the Mercedes seemingly on fire, as we do see Albanese then briefly reappear due to connectivity. But Fowler meanwhile just minding his own race, P8 of the GT3 Gold class, and where it definitely has been a difficult race for the Performance League Esports driver, and I think he'll be grateful just to get the car in home and get some points on the board and to write this one off as not his day, as he makes his way to the timeline to go on to what is lap number 19. plenty more still to be turned for our GT3 drivers. As he powers his way through the 6.3 litre V8 Mercedes engine, they're absolutely roaring to the score. And meanwhile, further up the road, we see Jordan Benoit still with Ollie Wayne behind. In fact, Benoit falling back a little bit off of Daniel Stillman, the leader of the class in the GT3 bronze class over a recent couple of laps. In fact, losing out by what was 8 tenths on the previous lap, but it's understandable. Lap times are going to oscillate considerably here, and we can see there Benoit taking quite the cut on the kicker turn number 10 as he makes his way up towards the first of those chicanes. And I wonder if he's worried about Wayne potentially putting a move on him. Now, of course, if you're playing Wayne in this position, why would you be worried about another GT3 class driver coming on through? Well, I think it is because he wants track position here, so that way he hasn't got any dirty air over the front of the car, and therefore he can really just run comfortable pace. Because, of course, with this Le Mans circuit, with the lap time being for your GT3 drivers just shy of 4 minutes, the fastest drivers around here are looking in the region of 3 minutes 55, or if you look to Deagon Faircloth's fastest lap of 3 minutes 54.81, which continues to stand. The thing with this circuit is you need to be at your maximum, and when you have a driver in front of you, the dirty air is not a problem for the first half of the lap. The problem comes in the second half of the lap, where you have the Porsche curves, the Corvette curves, and it really unsettles the front aero balance of the car, and for the Ferrari in particular, very sensitive to its rear end through those momentum changes. And Benoit really pushing on here and just trying to keep Wayne away, and therefore he doesn't want to be caught up behind Wayne, because what he would gain in terms of saving fuel behind the Mercedes driver, he's likely to lose more in terms of then having to offset the fact he's going to lose cornering capability on the latter half of each lap. But as they make their way up towards Malzahn corner this time, I think it's a question of when, not if, we're going to be seeing Wayne look for a way on through. But you can see how much he's gained over the course of the lap so far. But of course, the Mercedes in its element currently with regards to ability to be able to accelerate up to top gear very rapidly, and also really hammer the throttle with these recent changes. We've seen our Mercedes drivers just look so much more comfortable in the car with the front end, with the aerodynamics being brought forward, more of a front aero balance, plus also the centre of mass of the car being raised, and also the rear tyres not wearing as much as they previously used to. And it is showing here a circuit where rear tyre wear would be a consideration for the Mercedes drivers. But as they head down towards turn number 19 there, Indianapolis, we do have what is RTC photo there in the YouTube chat, or that's RT Chats Constanto if you're looking for the driver who said he's had to take a real-life driver swap with his brother due to having pains in his leg. So when you do look to RT Chats Constanto on circuit, it's his brother in the car. You wouldn't mind RT telling us what your brother's first name is, so we can definitely call that out right in the course of the remainder of the broadcast. Albeit right now, Chats Constanto down in P7 of the GT3 bronze class, but pushing on a lap down and wanting to get to the end, and that's what it's all about here. As meanwhile, we do start to see some more pit stops coming up for our GT3 drivers. In fact, we just had Deagon Faircloth into the pits of the lead of the GT3 Gold class. Jorge Santos coming in from P6 of the bronze class, and well, as we do see our drivers starting to pick the way on in, the question will be, of course, can anybody go along and potentially just eke that strategy out and give themselves a more aggressive final stint of the day? And will one driver who I think will be the big fly in the ointment for many is this man from Racing Team Astra, Stefan Wessels, the man who took tyres, all 4 of them in the first pit stop. And as he makes his way on through the Dunlop chicane this time, up to P6, Deagon Faircloth leaving the pit lane. Well, Faircloth may be on to victory here, despite what these strategies around him may say. It does look to be destiny for the Rocket Racing Stars driver, but meanwhile the Racing Team Astra driver Vessels push it on as he makes his way up towards the Tetra Rouge corner. But as we do hit Chris Daines into the pit lane, we've also got our GT3 Silver leaders in, including Paul Scott, Ollie Wayne and Stefan Albanese. They're all into the pits here, and you'll notice up on the jacks of both Scott and Wayne, it's a sign here where they're now going to have to change those remainder tyres, and also they may change all 4 of them to give themselves some comfort. But as our drivers get themselves set here, Wayne and Scott both off the jacks, and Albanese onto the jacks now, continue to take fuel to get to the very end as Paul Scott pulls off. Meanwhile, Espresso Rien takes the lead of the GT3 Silver class. A pit stop still to be taken, of course. And as he comes on through the Dunlop chicane, now into the S's, Baz Meacham only 6 seconds behind, and Meacham continuing to strip time out of Written, and on that last lap taking another 3 seconds out. I definitely think Meacham is on course here for P4 today as a minimum. In terms of being on the podium, again, it's going to be, I think, just a push too far for the privateer from Wales, but still to come from the back of the class to P4 after having to make a pit stop on the opening lap after that nasty incident in the run into the moles and chicanes. I think the 5.1 driver here has definitely proven that it's not just about winning that leads to a championship title. It's also about, when you have a bad day and are up against the odds, about finding a way to get the points regardless. And as he presses on down here, meanwhile in the LMP2 class, we do have our leaders in, and that's Barrie Jarman in the SCCR SimSports number 8 car up on the jacks there. Also Kevin Stringer into the pit lane as he makes it to his pit box and out of the pits. Well, that is, I believe, Chris Daines there with an extended pit stop, and what will likely be his penultimate stop of the day for Daines. Everybody now really started to bring these stops together. Mark Sykes a bit further back, still pressed on through it for P3 here with an advantage of what is 1.5 minutes over Nigel Stock. So I think Sykes will feel safe here versus Stock, albeit Stock having to make one more pit stop compared to Sykes so far, and therefore keeping that in mind, Sykes gets that bit wrong and goes around on pit entry there. We've seen a number of drivers get it wrong on pit entry, but Sykes, another one to fall foul of the dreaded grass there and the curbing on the way in, and the number 666 driver here, well, that number cursed for some, and could it be cursed for him today as he heads into the pit lane? But meanwhile, with all this going on, we've got further happening further up the field, including Daines here, who now charging on down. One is the miles and straight here after his pit stop. Well, we can see at P6 in the LMDH Gold class, Magda Yonan yet to take his third stop. So Fetty Daines is P5 in the class, and Will Jones, meanwhile, yet to take his third stop, his third scheduled stop, we should say, albeit he's already taken one is 2 pit stops. And as our tries make the way on down here, charging on through, we can see Daines doing everything right so far as he powers his way up towards the second of the moles and chicanes. Still plenty more time to go, but with that in his mind, of course, he'll be thinking about what can he do here in order to get himself the victory that he so craves. He's got a lot of pace, but he's got the question of Williams and also Dorey. What are they doing on strategy? But as we have confirmation in the YouTube chat there from RT Chats Constantine, that is his brother Costa who is in the car, and RT will be back in the car for the final 15 minutes. And thank you for that, RT. We really do appreciate that. Well, Costa right now just pressing on at the back of the field, and indeed, well, not quite at the back of the field, Mark Arrowsmith being further behind, and our first and only retirement of today, we should point out, Mark Arrowsmith retiring at the start of what was lap number 11 with that major incident, of course, cost him very dear. But right now, the privateer of what is there, Costa Chats Constantine, behind the cockpit of the car with his brother taking a brief moment out, and the number 22 BMW pushing on all the same as it makes its way up through the Porsche curves with Baz Meacham coming up behind a lap ahead. As they make the way on around here. Meanwhile, in the G3 Gold class, more pit stops playing out with Deegan Fairclough coming on through here to retake P3 in the class with Jochen Siegert and Frederick Dorey making the way up. And in fact, there, Benson taking a slow run up towards the Dunlop chicane, but it looks as though, well, Benson there having taken the second stop, and Fairclough had to jump back ahead of Benson at short notice. Again, the move done there. Benson putting a blind on strategy as they come on down, and meanwhile, Gavin Garner yet to pit. Could we see a surprise here in terms of strategies? Well, I think if we are, Stefan Vessels leaving the pit lane now, and Vessels, well, we thought he might have been on a very different strategy, but for Vessels, he's only leaving the pit lane. He's back in P7, and Vessels, and this has not worked out for at all with what is, well, it's just shy of 40 minutes to go here. It's 37.5 to be a bit more precise, but Deegan Fairclough now pressing on, I think conscious of the fact that with Benson close behind, he'll need to open up the gap a little bit further as we see Mark Sykes look up the inside here, and the Rocket Racing Stars trying not moving off his line in the centre of the road, as meanwhile Eric Benson behind will be looking at this and thinking, if only I had a little bit more time out on circuit, I could have been able to jump ahead of Fairclough in the pit lane. Wasn't to be, but the Team Slow-Mo driver will know that he has kept Fairclough honest on strategy, if not on one lap pace, as they head towards the end of this race. But powering their way down towards the second moles and chicane now. Further behind, you can see Jochen Siegert there falling a little bit further away from his fellow Team Slow-Mo driver, with Frederick Dorey also there in P5. Indeed, it does look as though Team Slow-Mo really enjoying this circuit. But meanwhile, we have Gavin Garner, who's still yet to pit. He's gone the longest of all of our GT3s on this second stint. But how far is he going? as he makes his way down into Indianapolis corner here, coming down into the braking zone very shortly. The NXTGEN Racing Pink driver will be wary of the fact that he'll likely be coming back out in the battle to be just off of the podium as he heads his way in towards our large corner. And as he heads onto the braking zone, meanwhile we're hearing the Magnus Flotter into the pit lane from P8 to the GT3 Gold class, releasing Russell Fowler back into position, and Fowler in P8 of the class. And those two continue to battle for P8 all the way to the very end, with Fowler holding the initiative there in their small battle. But meanwhile, as we look up to Craig Jones here in the LMDH Gold class, he's got the company of Paul Williams behind, with Jones having made 3 pit stops so far, 1 for what was the incident at the start of the race, and then 2 on schedule here. So effectively he's on 2 stops so far in his strategy, a 3rd yet to come, with Paul Williams behind, also only 2 stops into his strategy. And both of these drivers continue to push together here as they start to come up behind a cluster of GT3s, and that is Stefan Vessels looking up the inside of Jorge Santos, the 2 Audi drivers there. Vessels a lap ahead, and Chance Constantine will be the next target as they make the way on out. You can see there Will Jones and also what is Williams having to pick the way on around the GT3s, and the GT3s just stay into their racing lines as they make the way on down. Meanwhile, into the pit lane comes Benjamin McCluskey for the lead of the LMDH Gold and overall race. And as we do, look to McCluskey coming on in with Gavin Garner in tow as well. What about Gaz Williams? Well, Williams goes on for another lap, and Williams definitely trying to go as long as possible here in terms of strategy today as he heads up towards turns 2 and 3. And well, given the length of the stints that we are seeing from our LMDH drivers, if Williams is somehow able to get rid of a pit stop here, I think it's unlikely, but if he can make it happen, that would be absolutely huge given the pace that he's shown. But as he makes his way on down and through the S's, I think it may be that he's got to do a very quick splash and dash at the end of the race, whereas others may have to do slightly longer refuels to go on to that final very short stint. But meanwhile, Jamie Dorey here up into P2. Yet to take his 3rd stop as well, and Benjamin McCluskey still being serviced in the pit lane. In fact, leaving the pit lane as soon as I say that, makes his way on out. And where are his rivals? Well, Jones is making his way through the Porsche curves and into the Corvette curves. Meanwhile, Chris Daines had an extended stop last time round, 1 minute and 4 seconds stationary time. So that would, to me, suggest that Daines having a considerable switch of tyres than that previous stop. And meanwhile, Jones here pushing on all the same, as what we can see that meanwhile Paul Williams comes into the pit lane, but even further on and back behind them, Stefan Vessels has been involved in an instant as he's going very slowly there through the Porsche curves. We see Jordan Baybois make his way on the inside there, but for Vessels something has gone wrong. What exactly has happened? Let's take a look. Making his way into the first part of the Porsche curves here, and the rear of the car starts to snap loose, and it just catches him out there as he tries to provide some corrective steer, but in the end he oversteered too much for the racing team at Astra Audi, and Vessel's trying to bring the car back on around, but a nasty moment as he has a tap to the wall as well, and that's not going to do any good for him today in what has definitely been not a strong day for the South African. But as he brings himself back up to speed, he'll stay in it all the way to the end, knowing that anything could happen as he comes in to the pit lane. But as he comes on down here and through, well, the question there from Deegan Fairclough in the YouTube chat saying, have I got to do another stop? Well, you're only required in your pit stop to take on fuel and change all 4 tyres at least once. So Deegan, it's up to you in terms of if you have met those requirements of changing all 4 tyres at least once, and also take on fuel to get to the end, then you won't have to make another pit stop. And given we have seen so many of our GT3s looking to do a 2-stop here today, it may just be working out in your favour as we see the Rocket Racing Styles driver make his way on through the Moles End chicane. But as he goes a bit deep there, the car catches him slightly. I think tyre wear building as meanwhile Gavin Gardner coming on down here, and whilst everything's been happening, Gardner has had his pit stop and he's come out ahead of what is Jochen Siegert and Felix Sensible Dorey, and the 2 team slow-mo drivers here caught up behind, and Gardner getting it done in the pit lane. And now as they make the way down towards Moles End corner, well, this is going to get very tight as they're battling for the final spot on the G3 Gold podium, with Craig Jones making his way on through. Well, as they head down towards the braking zone, you can see Felix Sensible Dorey looking up the inside of his teammate here, and well, he wants another shot at Gardner. I think Ayrton also wants a shot at this, but Dorey being given priority as they make the way through Moles End and now charge their way up towards Indianapolis once more. But charging the way on down. Meanwhile, we're hearing that Chris Daines has been involved in an instant on circuit, and well, we will try and get a replay of that very shortly. But first up, we're going to get a replay of how Gardner got the move done versus Ayrton for what was P3 in the G3 Gold class. whereas in the drag race in the end, all the way down towards the second chicane on the inside here. And as he looked to the move, it was going to come naturally and get his nose ahead, and will be put in that position through strategy, coming out ahead of Dorey, but behind Ayrton, and then just making the final move there. And as we return to the live pictures now, you can see how close these guys are together as the race presses on, as they make their way out of Varnage and up towards the Porsche curves once again. But charging the way all the way down, and well, as they make the way up towards turn number 22. Both drivers here doing everything in their power to try and make that ground, but meanwhile heading into the braking zone, you can see how Ayrton just gradually falling back as time presses on. And well, to put it in perspective in terms of how the move was made between Dorey and Gardner in the pit lane, and then it was literally tenths between them as Gardner got himself back up to speed, and that's how it worked out in Gardner's favour. Dorey now trying to come back, and in fact we can take a look back at exactly how that occurred on the exit of the pit lane, and here's the replay. As he makes his way up to speed, you'll see very shortly, here is the pair of Dorey and Ayrton, and as they headed on through the Dunlop curve, Gardner building his way up through the gearbox, and you'll see that Ayrton here will have the speed and look up the inside at short notice. In fact, no, Gardner holding firm ahead, and it was Ayrton who had the run onto the Mulsanne straights in the end, but that was how Gardner got ahead on strategy and then had to defend it on the run into the Mulsanne chicanes. So as we return to the live pictures in the end, now it's Dorey battling with Gardner once again, and these two, of course, firm rivals on the circuit, but friends off circuit as they make the way on around. But a brilliant rivalry between the two of them as they head on through towards a new lap, and in fact this will be their 23rd lap under race conditions. But meanwhile, whilst all this is going on, we can see that Craig Jones is in the pit lane, and also we have had an incident with Chris Daines, and well, our flying driver in the LMDH Gold class, what has exactly happened? So he's had to be towed to the pits. It's been a nasty one, by the sounds of things, and here it was as he made his way down towards what was the first of Mulsanne chicanes under braking, and caught up behind there one of the GT3s, and will just be caught out the NXTGEN Racing pink driver with the slide, and in the end tow into the pits. And that is how it's all gone wrong for the NXTGEN Racing pink driver, who was definitely in with a major opportunity here of taking the win, or at least finishing on the podium. But now it's going to be a sizable amount of time spent in the pit lane, and when he gets back out of the circuit, I think it'll be at best P6 in the LMDH Gold class. But meanwhile, with 29 minutes to go, Dorey loses the rear of the car on the first exit of the Mulsanne chicane, and the Team Slobo driver there, just about a small man. And we've seen a number of drivers in the Audi R8 have these little sensitive snap oversteer moments on power exit, and the Norwegian no stranger to those now, and that's going to cost him very dear. I think Gavin Gardner will just breathe a sigh of relief that he's now clear of his main rival in this battle for P3 in the GT3 Gold class. As he makes his way in towards the second chicane here, where in terms of his lap pace, Eric Benson in P2 is lapping a couple of attempts a lap faster by comparison. So Gardner here fighting to be on the final step of the podium. Meanwhile, further up the road, we can tell you that Gaz Williams is into the pit lane for his final pit stop. As I look at my contact booth window, he's coming from the lead of the LMDH Gold class, and Jamie Dorey, who is sitting currently a further 25.6 seconds behind, will yet to take his third pit stop, what could be his final stop potentially. Well, with that in mind, I think for Jamie Dorey, he'll be looking to finish P2 at the utmost now, as Dorey is into the pit lane. We haven't confirmed that Benjamin McCluskey, by comparison, has already taken his third stop, so we'll keep our eyes on how those three come together at the very end of the proceedings. But as we see it, Gardner making his way on down towards Indianapolis here. He'll head Ayrton now, falling away little by little, and it's Eric Benson who he has his sights on if he can find a way to catch up to the second place driver. As he heads on down, we look to the pit lane, and there is Gaz Williams being serviced currently, with Jamie Dorey making his way on down, and Benjamin McCluskey makes his way on through as McCluskey retakes the lead of this race. Williams leaving the pit lane now, and Williams making time on McCluskey, interestingly, over the pit stops. But as we do see McCluskey retaking the lead, of course the question mark remains, will McCluskey and indeed will all of our LMDH drivers have to take a fourth stop here, or can anybody make the three stop strategy work, given the fact we've only got 27 minutes to go? And well, for Williams and Dorey, if they do have to make one last stop, it is going to be such a short stop compared to what may be for McCluskey, but I think the strategies will all start to mesh back together, because the advantage McCluskey has over Williams is 10.7 seconds as of this lap so far. And now the NXTGEN Racing purple driver knows he has to go for broke, with one of his main rivals, Chris Daines, out of the pitch here, the NXTGEN Racing Pink driver, with that instant at the first of the miles and chicanes at this very point as we're coming into now. And McCluskey knows that destiny could be on the cards here as he comes on through and heads up towards the next chicane. As he charges his way on down. Meanwhile, we do look to Jamie Dorey, who sitting a good portion of what is 26.3 seconds behind Williams, and that gap has opened up quite considerably over the last few laps, with Dorey doing everything here to finish on the podium, with Jones a further what is 40 seconds or so behind, and Yonland only 2 seconds off of Jones. Well, to give you an idea of what that looks like in perspective, here is Craig Jones in the battle for P4 for SCCR SimSports, ahead of Yonland just behind, and Yonland here back on the pace of Jones, and the two of them exchanging lap times if it's going out of style, and the Team Slower Black driver here really in the hunt to finish just off the podium, as we are hearing it's a retirement from Daines as a result of that incident, and unfortunate for the NXTGEN Racing Pink driver, and that may just be something that really does torpedo his championship campaign, because of course he knew he needed the win here today. I think the fastest lap will go his way, given the fastest lap so far still stands at 24.26 in the LMDH cars, but can anybody beat it right in the end? So Daines does not get that luxury. We'll have to wait and see. Of course, we're not wishing it, but everyone will be looking at it and thinking they might be able to beat that bar. But meanwhile, we can see here back that Yonland right now focused on one thing, and that is closing down Jones with the time remaining in this race. As meanwhile, we are hearing that RT Chats Constantu, in fact, it is what is, his brother of Costa Chatsto Constantu into the pit lane, and RT will be taking the car back over very shortly to complete the race. So the final, what will be, by the time we serve the pit stop, the final 24 minutes or so. But a brotherly effort there, lovely to see as the car goes up on the jacks, and they are P7 in the GT3 bronze class and the last of our runners on circuit. But as we look from our last runner back up to our leader overall, at the very front of the LMDH Gold field, we can see Benjamin McCluskey and the NXTGEN Racing Purple driver continue to string together lap after lap. And as he makes his way on past the stationary camera, the camera's shaking with the feral velocity of the 28 machine, as he heads up towards the Corvette curves here, leaving no stone untouched with regards to touching every bit of the corner and tarmac width as he heads up towards the forward chicanes. He knows he's got to deliver here. He's got to really push on, because there is a big question mark over Gaz Williams' strategy, and Williams right now is closing that gap down. It has come down to 8.8 seconds on this lap, albeit I think the traffic has worked out favourably for Williams compared to McCluskey, and that may go some way to describing why it's played out that way, but we will see it over the next 3 to 4 laps in terms of whether Williams is closing, holding or falling back, and then that may give us an indication of what we can expect in the final 15 to 10 minutes, if we see McCluskey, who we think has to do one more stop, and then whether Williams will be doing a final stop or whether he'll be just coasting it to the end and trying to bring on the hope based on one less pit stop. But as he powers his way up towards the S's, meanwhile, we look from him to your GT3 Gold leader, and we'll having taken a fast repair, the Rocket Racing Styles driver Deegan Fairclough makes his way down the back straight and up towards the Porsche curves here, continuing on his way with nobody really close enough. Eric Benson being 11.5 seconds back. Gavin Garner matching Fairclough for pace at the moment. And in fact, Eric Benson here, you can see it making his way up towards the aforementioned curves. And he's got the pressure building with Gavin Garner 5.3 seconds back. And as they head their way in to the right-hander, here's the perspective where you can see what 5.5 seconds looks like in the run into the Porsche curves. And then Jochen S 2.2 seconds back, albeit falling off of Gardner little by little. The traffic is gradually circumventing the amount of progress that Gardner's making in breaking away from Ayrton. But the key point here is the Ferrari driver is definitely now cemented his status as P3 in the GT3 Gold class circuit. For as they head out of the Corvette curves and up towards the forward chicanes, it just looks so Gardner at this point feeling a lot more comfortable in the car, and the lap time continues to string on in. But meanwhile, one driver who's trying to pick his way through the field for overall position, Stefan Vessel's here, where he's putting the fight on versus Matthew Addy. And of course, these two, no strangers to one another, have battled every so often in the NXTCC all of recent times. And as they make the way up towards the Indianapolis corner very shortly, Vessel's there right at the toe of the Porsche driver of Addy. Addy will stay on his racing line here. Vessels will look up the inside on the Kings. And I think what Addy will try to do is outbrake the Audi driver on the outside to inside run. But Vessel's already knows their head here through the second kick to go. They give each other ample space. They're neck and neck as they head up towards the braking zone. It's going to be about who's bolder on the brakes here. Addy in the end backs out and lets Vessels go. Vessels moves up to P26 overall as he doesn't gain class position there. The gold driver past the silver driver now. His next target is another silver driver of Ben Bennyworth, who's 2 seconds up the road but closing rapidly. They're heading on out of Arnage corner. Meanwhile, we have had Mark Baker come into the pits for his final stop of the day in the LMDH Silver class, taking a fourth and final stop, a very quick one in that, only 18.5 seconds, and therefore we do get a figure of exactly what those pit stops will look like for all of our 4 stoppers in the LMDH class. It'll be a very quick stop to boot. But meanwhile, as we see Vessels continue to crusade his way through the field, and Addy just tucking in behind here and continue to watch Baffiati falling back to P7 of the silver class. It's not been the strongest performance for Baffiati with a couple of incidents, cost him some time, but as he does have Benny McCluskey going around the outside, McCluskey using the lightness and the aero package there of the LMDH machine just to find his way around, and Addy going very wide, and I think that will result or culminate in another slowdown as he makes his way up towards the forward chicanes. And we can see that all the drivers filtering around one another in the traffic sequence. As meanwhile, we do look to Paul Williams, your LMDH Silver leader. Making his way out of Mulsanne corner here. Williams looking very comfortable at this point of the race, with his main rival in class Mark Baker 54.3 seconds behind. And Baker having made his full stop already, and well, if we translate that into the sequence, the gap is at least 10 seconds based on doing a little bit of predictive mathematics when we have Paul Williams make his way into the pits and out of it. But meanwhile, we look to Nigel Stock, who's had an off at what is Mulsanne corner there, and many a driver being caught out. We saw much earlier on a number of our GT3 drivers going very deep there, but Stock this time falling foul of the tricky right-hander at turn 15, and what exactly happened? Making his way down towards the braking zone here, full speed of course, he headed on down and then went on to the brakes, sharp on the brakes here, and the car locking up on the brakes, the front brakes, both of them at the same time, and Nigel starting to let the brakes go and let the car coast into the gravel. Catching it well, however, and not as potentially race ending as other instances could have been. But as he makes his way through Arnage and onwards towards the Porsche curves, of course, currently standing at what is a margin of 1 minute and 15 seconds of the Mark Sykes. And for Stock, it's all about just getting the car home and finishing at P4 in class. That way he brings home the points. Because, of course, with a class of only 4 drivers, every point is pivotal when effectively you only need to make 1 overtake to end up on the podium in theory. But right now, Stock here definitely making sure to bring home that P4. But as we look from him back to Ben Bennyworth, Bennyworth recently been passed by Stefan Vessels, and as they head up towards the second of the Mulsanne chicanes, Bennyworth tucking in behind and not looking to come back here as he lifts and coasts his way into the chicane, doing a little bit of fuel saving here. I think suspecting that Vessels is the faster of the 2 drivers over the entire lap, albeit he won't be having a very fast run out of the second chicane with that run wide. And I think there may be a slowdown on the potential cards of Vessels as Bennyworth tucks in behind here, and Vessels losing quite a bit of speed, but I think just trying to, if he has got a slowdown, lead the slowdown off very gently. And we did see that, of course, from some of our other drivers earlier on, including Aerosmith, as Bennyworth looking up the inside here, and Vessels tucking in behind as they make the way into the right-hander and coming on through. We do ride aboard the gearbox here of the Porsche 911 of Bennyworth. Now powering his way up through the gearbox with Vessels having that small mistake. He'll know not to do it again, and therefore be mindful of what he can do in terms of looking for moves. And I think the main opportunity will be to run out of Arnage up towards the Porsche curves. We can go for it, of course being mindful of that direction change and how it can unsettle the car. But as he heads up towards the Indianapolis corner here, 18 minutes to go, and a number of drivers now may find themselves tiring, but not Bennyworth or Vessels. We're getting Espresso Rian's had a brief off-track. Off-tracks now start to become a little bit more pivotal as Vessels takes a look up the inside there. Can't quite find him, and it goes around the outside as Bennyworth lifts off and lets Vessels go into our large corner. They're exiting their way out, building their way back up to speed once more. Well, in terms of what we're expecting now, of course, it is the big question in the LMDH class of who is on the 3-stop versus the 4-stop, unless everybody's on the 4-stop, of course. And also in the GT3 class, has everybody got enough fuel to make it to the end, unscathed on fuel capacity on their final stints, combining those aspects together. But otherwise, battle-wise, things are relatively calm right now, but it definitely has been an intense round of racing here at Le Mans, albeit in the first hours where we really did see the major action, and now it's come to strategic action. Although I say that, and then Stefan Albanese immediately contradicts our words there with a run wide at the final corner, and I think just a miss of the barrier as the Italian there for DRS Esports staying in P3 in the GT3 Silver class, P22 overall, not losing any positions, but definitely there, a blow to confidence, and I think worried about what could have been if it had gone a little bit more wrong. But we take a look back at what exactly happened. Riding on board here with the Italians, he made his way through the Ford chicanes. The turns at 30, 31 hooked up nicely on the brake in turn 32 and just broke a little bit too deep there. You could see how the car started to arch forward and lean very heavily on the front axle, and that is what led to the DRS Esports drive going wrong. So he tried to turn the car in, the rear of the car just all came forward at once, because you do have to keep in mind, of course, with the Audi R8, much like the Ferrari and also the Porsche 911 being mid-engine rear-wheel drive, the majority of the weight is centered behind the driver, so under braking, all that mass just suddenly comes charging forward behind the driver, and that's what leads to the car snapping loose. Plus, of course, tyre wear also a factor, and the tyres that all the drivers' cars will see that better days as we see Albanese heading down towards the Mulsanne chicanes once more. But indeed, much like Fairclough says there in the YouTube chat, with regards to drivers having to fuel save, Lightmad himself included, this is the point of the race now where if drivers haven't got enough fuel to get to the end by running standard pace, they'll be looking to try and save as much fuel. They'll have to scrimp fuel, and of course they'll be worried about the fact that if they do come into the pits, well, what does that mean for them in terms of their opportunity to win if it's Fairclough, for example. And we can see here with an advantage of 13 seconds currently over Eric Benson. Well, if he was to come into the pits, that 13-second advantage would be completely overhauled and turned the opposite way, and Benson would become your winner in the GT3 Gold class. We hear that Mark Sykes has just left the pit lane, taking what is his fourth and final stop of today. And Fairclough makes his way on through into the Corvette curves, and Benson here just a bit further back, where we can see heading into the Porsche curves now, making his way on around. The Team Slow-Mo driver definitely doing everything right in terms of delivering lap in, lap out, and keeping Gavin Gardner at bay. But Gardner is running a little bit faster at this point of the race, 3/10 gain of the previous lap, and the Next Gen Racing pink driver continue to push on as he makes his way through the Corvette curves and up towards the Ford chicanes. And as we hear that Barrie Jarman and will be Kevin Stringer most likely soon coming into the pits, well, Gardner heads his way on down here into turns 30 through to 33, and the two drivers in the picture there are Benson and Gardner from Freebone. You see Jochen S the further 8.5 seconds back at the rear of the picture on the long distance shot, but as Gardner comes on out, Benson on that lap, it was a 57.90. Meanwhile, Gardner a 57.39. Gavin Gardner is continuing to gain here at a rapid rate of knots. It's 6 tenths on that lap, and if he carries on at this rate of closure, he'll be there right at the end of the race, looking to put the move onto Benson on the final lap as they head out of the Dunlop chicane. Well, of course, closing is one thing, and here it takes a long time to close up, given the length of the lap around the Le Mans circuit, and therefore Gardner's just got to keep sticking to his mantra of the lap times he puts in, and the strategy is working out, and he's got the fuel to get to the end, and hope that Benson potentially makes some mistakes, knowing that his rival's getting close. Of course, that's the fear factor. When you're this deep into the race with only 14 minutes to go, you look down to your timing tower, you haven't come over the radio from the team principal to say that the driver behind is closing, and that changes your mental state when you're driving. You don't want to be thinking about that, but it suddenly preys on you, and the strongest drivers will have that mental fortitude. They won't think about it. The only time they'll worry is when the driver behind is within 1 second, because then they know they're in tow zone, they're in the slipstream, and they become a threat. Benson right now will be just doing one thing, and that is keeping his eyes down, focusing forward, not behind, and continue to put in the lap times as best as he can. He's got Jack Barker ahead of him by 9 tenths there, a lap down the GT3 Silver P8 driver, and he'll use him as a little bit of a tow magnet as they head up towards the second of the Mulsanne chicane, and this will work out nicely for Benson. He'll gain a bit of lap time here. as he gets ready to head onto the brakes, but of course where it will cost him if he doesn't clear Barker before he does get to Indianapolis corner, because the nature of the lap does start to slow. Barker of course will be wary of the blue flags, and those will be waved and he'll look to respect them, but of course it will be on the minor Benson here that he'll want to clear the silver driver sooner rather than later, as we hear that Stefan Albanese is into the pit lane one last time today for what will be another pit stop, as meanwhile Stefan Wessels pushing on here his next target, Espresso Rien, looking up the inside there, the team slow-mo driver. Again, this is for overall position, not class position, with Wessels being the GT3 Gold driver versus Rien, the silver GT3 driver. But as they head on down, Wessels enjoying the race, and I think Espresso Rien, given the fact that Gaz Williams is a whole at 16 seconds up the road, I don't think it's going to be too much of a complaint for Rien if he's battling. And we should point out that Espresso Rien, with the loss of the position to Gaz Williams and the fact that we've also had Stefan Albanese into the pit lane, Meacham has moved back into P3 in the silver class off screen. But meanwhile, Wessels here looking for the move around the outside of Rien and gets it done there through the kick and 10 before they head into the first of the chicanes. And I think Rien here just wanted to tuck in and save some fuel as they power the way on down. But Wessels here showing no signs of leaving anything on the table. He hasn't really got any class battles to deliver on now. But meanwhile, we do look from them to Paul Scott, who's under pressure from Ollie Wade. And this is a very late resurgence of Ollie Wade in the battle for the lead of the GT3 Silver class. For as they make the way out of turn 15 and up towards what is Indianapolis they go. We can see here the NXTGEN Racing orange driver 3/10 clear as they head on down, charging up through the gearbox, both of them. And that Mercedes that's really come alive in the last couple of laps. We haven't had any instance for Paul Scott. Paul Scott has just seemingly not got the pace compared to Wayne. And Wayne here looking up the inside already. Well, it's going to be the battle of the two NXTGEN Racing drivers as they head down towards Indianapolis. It's going to be Wayne on the inside, Scott on the outside. And Ollie Wayne takes the lead of the G3 Silver class there at Indianapolis as he gets it done. And the NXTGEN Racing purple driver now presses on to take victory potentially if he can break away from Paul Scott on the remainder of this lap. As they make the way out of our large corner, Wayne has been putting the laps together in absolutely scintillating style as they make the way up towards the Porsche curves here. 7/10 already. I think Paul Scott maybe needs to fuel save here. I don't think he's got enough, because just look at how much that Mercedes has pulled away. And given that Scott's pace throughout the entirety of today's race has been equal to Wayne's, I think there's something that's gone wrong with strategy here, because Wayne right now is just in a world of his own. They're both on 2 stops apiece, so Wayne feels as though he can push it here with what is 10 minutes remaining plus the final lap. Of course, we could have a consideration if they go very deep in terms of this one more lap more than what they perhaps anticipated as we stumble over our own words there. Then Wayne may find himself on the back foot on the final lap. Indeed, both drivers may find themselves on the back foot and need to make a pit stop right to the end. But Wayne definitely right now coming out of left field and taking the lead of that silver class with limited time to go. But he's making it count here as he presses on down towards what will be his 28th lap shortly. But as they power their way on through and up towards turns 1, 2 and 3, we can see behind the Kevin Stringer continue to charge on, albeit Barrie Jarman 30.7 seconds up the road. I think the SCCR SimSports driver here now focusing on completing that 1-2 for the team. He'll be the number 2 in that formation, but he won't mind too much. Of course, they did go for the 1-2 at last time out Indianapolis in the feature race, albeit there was a little bit of an altercation between them and the GT3 field right at the end, which did upset the apple cart there slightly. But as Stringer makes his way on down through the S's now, he'll be patient here and just let Wayne take the S's and through Tech Rouge most likely before he comes charging on through in the run onto the Mulsanne Straight. But as they head on around here, we look to the LMDH Gold class leader of Benjamin McCluskey. 3 pit stops complete so far, 9 minutes remaining, and does McCluskey need to come in once more? Our gut feeling says he does. It'll be right towards the end of this race. He won't have enough fuel, given the fact after this lap he will have 2 more laps remaining if we do a bit of quick estimation, and that will take him on to what will be a grand total of 34 racing laps as he makes his way into Mulsanne corner. And heading on down here, Gaz Williams by comparison running 2 seconds a lap slower, but in running 2 seconds a lap slower, is he saving enough fuel to get rid of that prospect of a full pit stop here? That'll be the thing that is on his mind. As meanwhile we're hearing that Chats Constantinou, Arthur Chats Constantinou behind the wheel, has had to jump to the pitch due to an incident, and we see Costa Chats Constantinou there in the YouTube chat saying a decent little stint, that from me. I feel no practice at all and didn't even know how the car felt going into race. It was a solid stint for yourself, Costa. Good to see you taking it over the wheel from your brother. and it's all about the teamwork making the dream work. We love it to see it here at NXTGEN. But as we do see Gaz Williams heading on down towards Indianapolis, we do take a look at what happened to Chequered Constantin. Making his way down into the braking zone. Then we talked about the grass, where our drivers are getting so close to the grass under braking smells, and a horrific instant for the 22 car there into the barriers, and well, definitely a toe to the pits. The front axle, you see where it's pointed in the wrong direction. It's all gone wrong for Chequered Constantin. I think they're delayed to going into the pit lane via the toe. I think that's just simply because of being knocked about so much there, and indeed I think having to catch his breath after that nasty incident. But thankfully the car's back in the pit lane, and well, we'll be seeing the car make its way back out into circuit in due course after the tow has been completed and also the fast repairs being used. But definitely a nasty moment, and that brings up our point earlier. If you take to that grass, the car will slide to the wall. But meanwhile, speaking of a point of contention, into the pit lane comes Benjamin McCluskey from the lead of this race. We also see that Digan Fairclough in from the lead of the G3 Gold class. He hasn't been able to go to the end on fuel, so this means we are now going to see a shake-up potentially in both the LMDH Gold and the G3 Gold races right at the end. And well, where is Gaz Williams? Here he goes, and he's only got 2 more laps to go. Meanwhile, Eric Benson coming out the final corner, and well, if he can get to the end on this fuel, Eric Benson is now your class leader for Team Slow-Mo as he makes his way up the hill towards the Dunlop chicane. Gavin Garner comes on through to take P2, and where is Digan Fairclough? That's the question. Well, here he comes. He clears the pit limit at 9, and the Rocket Racing Stars driver P3, he's got out ahead of Jochen Siegert by a couple of seconds. But with this now, Fairclough, I don't think will be able to recover enough time. He would need to take 6 seconds a lap out of Gardner and Benson. Well, I can tell you, based on relative lap times over the last 10 laps, he will not be taking that time out unless Gardner and Benson have a complete calamity of laps from here on in. But this is a shock, it's a surprise. But right now, the Rocket Racing Stars drive battling for a podium instead as he heads down towards Tetridge Corner once again. Benjamin McCluskey comes on through there, P2, with Jamie Dorey behind him as we see Dorey coming through the S's, and will Dorey having fallen back to P3, yet to take a 4th pit stop. McCluskey has taken that stop, so it is now a battle of the 3 stop from Gaz Williams versus the full stop of Benjamin McCluskey, and who will go to the end. And well, I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of strategies, when I did talk to Jamie Dorey in the build-up to tonight, as he makes his way on through, he was saying to me in the fact that he did have a very key strategy lined up, in the fact that every stop he would be changing front tyres, and halfway through the race he would change all 4. Well, the strategy has not worked out for Dorey per se, but right now Gaz Williams is definitely, if he's going to be going all the way to the end on this 3rd and final pit stop, this is going to be a huge undercut of a strategy here, because he powers his way down towards Mulsanne Corner. That has gained him effectively what is 24 seconds of race time, but you can be certain McCluskey right now will leave nothing up to question. He will put everything down the circuit in case Williams has to come in one more time. He's got to. McCluskey has been backed into a corner here, which he has just got no room now, other than he's got to go for broke. Meanwhile, Williams has just got to manage this race and get the car home with one more lap after this one. 4.5 minutes still remaining, and McCluskey here doing everything in his power to try and bring the race back to him, but I think it's too late. Meanwhile, Jochen Siegert, well, he has got ahead of him Frederick Stensford-Durey, and these two together, in fact, Stensford-Durey having recently passed Siegert in the run down the straights, and I think they're having to swap places, do some fuel saving between them as they make the way out of Mulsanne Corner and upwards towards Indianapolis they go, with Jamie Dorey going around the inside of them as they make their way up towards the right-hander of Indianapolis, or the entry, we should say. It's a left-hander, of course, the actual corner apex, but as they power the way on down here, drivers continue to charge on through, and well, still little time remaining here, 4 minutes to the closing stages. And well, whilst it's been relatively quiet in the chat tonight, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube or Twitch, we completely understand, of course, given the fact you'll concentrate on seeing how our drivers hand it out with regards to the racing on their strategies. Le Mans, the thinking man's race circuit, of course, where strategy is ever so critical, but we are now seeing how all the strategies are pieced together. And as we do look to Ben Bennyworth here, close up to the back of Russell Fowler in the battle for G3 overall position. Indeed, overall, considering all classes, they are battling for P24, and Bennyworth with 7.5 tenths as they make their way down the second part of Mulsanne. But powering the way on down here, the two drivers pressing on for the closing stages. But meanwhile, as we look to Gaz Williams, he goes on to the final lap here, and it's no pit stop from Gaz Williams. He's going for the free stop. He's committed to it, and he thinks he can do it. 23 seconds is the gap between himself and McCluskey. He's got the time to play with here. He can back the car off. He can fuel save to his heart's content, but he'll want the car to sip the fuel. He'll feel that all the calculations have been done right, but McCluskey right now, well, he sets a 3:58.417 on his first flying lap. It's not enough to even come close to ripping the time down, and as Williams heads on around here, will then all the way out towards Bolzan. Of course, McCluskey had to exit the pits on that previous lap. It's a good out lap, but it's not enough to really put the pressure on Williams here. Williams right now looking very comfortable as he powers his way down the Bolzan straight for the final time today. But meanwhile, we do look from there to Eric Benson, who GT3 Gold leader, and he is still being caught by Gavin Gardner. They are on their final lap, and Gardner catching at a rate of 7 tenths of a second a lap. But as they make their way through the S's here, you can see Gardner right now caught up behind Jamie Dorey, and whilst they make the way on through, we've had an instant further back. We have got for an extension, Dorey has been involved in an instant, but Gardner here focusing on him for a brief moment, trying to find a way to close down that final 2 seconds. This takes ever more precedence. Meanwhile, there's more drama. Paul Scott is into the pit lane. Well, we saw that Ollie Wayne had to come for an extra stop. Scott comes on in now, knowing he can't get to the end for that 34th and final lap. Daniel Stimmen will come on through to take overall position, and with that, that will mean that today, and this will be the first time we have seen this in the history of the Proto GT3 League, we are going to see the lower class of GT3 driver win ahead of another class. In terms of, we'll see the bronze class finish ahead of the silver class, which we've never seen today. But meanwhile, Paul Scott making its way out of his pit box. He's taken the fuel only 8 seconds in the pits. Ollie Wayne coming out of the final corner here. The NXTGEN Racing purple driver powers on through. Paul Scott still leaving and getting himself up to speed. It's going to be very close between them. Scott exits the pit lane now. He'll be egging the car on as much as he possibly can. He'll want the V10 and guild speed more quickly, but Wayne there comes on through. He looks up the inside. Scott's not able to cover it off, and Ollie Wayne comes on through. There's contact between them, and Scott's back there as they make their way out of the Dunlop chicane. On the inside, Scott was able to defend after the contact. Meanwhile, Paul Williams tries to make it 3 wide as they come on down, but as they roll the way through, Scott covers off the inside into the S's, lets Williams go and keeps Wayne at bay. But this battle's going to go all the way down to the wire now, for as they make the way up towards Tetra Rouge, they'll roll the way through the right-hander, and Paul Scott will know he's at a deficit here. He's not got the straight line speed that the Mercedes could pull, but as they make the way down the Mulsanne straight here after 2 hours, it is a single tenth that separates them. And as they power the way on down the backstretch now, we can see here that Scott having to cover off the inside. Wayne building up the speed, going on the full offensive here as they power the way down. Wayne's got a nose ahead as they get ready to battle on the brakes. And well, we do have to cut away from this very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, because as we see the battle here, and Wayne gets ahead for a brief moment, making his way through the final 2 corners. He's pulled it off of the free stop. Some may have doubted him, but he did doubt himself. And as he comes to the timeline, it's Gaz Williams who takes the overall and the LMDH Gold win after 2 hours of racing for NXTGEN Racing Purple, ahead of shortly what will be Benjamin McCluskey, who comes on through to take P2 in the LMDH Gold class in a brilliant drive on the NXTGEN Racing Purple drive. The team make it 1-2, but of course it was the offset of the 3 versus the 4 stop. In the end, the free stop reigns supreme in the form of Gaz Williams as McCluskey takes the fastest lap on the final lap as well, taking those bonus points. And then Barrie Jarman in the LMP2 class, in what's been a relatively uneventful race for the SCCR SimSports driver, will bring on home the win in the class there as he crosses the timeline in brilliant fashion in the number 8 machine. And as he comes on through to take victory, a well-deserved one at that, with a clear advantage over Kevin Stringer. But meanwhile, we've got more battling going on as we do see. We'll come to those battles shortly, ladies and gentlemen, because we have got class winners coming to the end. And Eric Benson here making his way on down for Team Slow-Mo. I think he's very low on fuel here as he comes to the final couple of corners. It'll be a surprise to him, but he's done it. He's managed to outlast the circuit. He's outlasted the fuel situation. He comes to line, and he is your G3 Gold winner ahead of Gavin Gardner, who finishes P2 in class in a brilliant battle for the podium. It will then be Dean Fairclough, who finishes P3 ahead of Frederick Stensvold Dorey. But meanwhile, we've got more drivers coming on through, including Ollie Wayne, where he's a way off yet, and he's still ahead of Paul Scott here as they power the way on down. So your next finishers of key relevance in terms of podium finishers will be the GT3 bronze finishers. We'll come to them shortly as we continue to watch Wayne versus Paul Scott here. And in fact, we are hearing that Jamie Dorey has finished P4 in the GT3 Gold class ahead of Jochen Siegert just at the finish line. He's been able to hold off Siegert, but meanwhile, Wayne here charging on, and he's not been repassed by Paul Scott in the run down the Mole's Edge stretches. So now as he does head down the back stretch up towards the Porsche curves, not long to go, and it's all about corners now where the Audi is strong, but still Wayne will do everything in his power. But we must look from them, ladies and gentlemen, because making his way through the final couple of corners in a flawless drive and really a master in the Mercedes, it's Ross of Universal Robots, Daniel Stillman, who takes the win in the G3 bronze class ahead of Jordan Baybois at the end by 1.3 seconds. And then it is Paul Williams who takes to win the LMDH Silver class there. But meanwhile, we must go back to the battle for the win of the G3 Silver class. It is still two for now as they make the way up towards the Porsche curves, the Ford chicanes for the final time. They head on through here, turns 30 and 31, hooked up. Two more corners to go for Ollie Wayne. He doesn't need to do anything spectacular now. He exits the final two corners and he takes the class win by 2.5 tenths at the line ahead of Paul Scott in the GT3 Silver class. What a brilliant battle team, and Baz Meacham there at the very end, 1.5 seconds off. The privateer going all the way to the back of the field after an open lap incident and has turned the whole race around to finish only 1.5 seconds off the winners. My goodness, Meacham was flying, but Paul Scott and Ollie Wayne with that extra pit stop at the end as well cost them very dear. But what a brilliant race between them all. We've still got more drives to come to a timeline, including what is Ben Bennyworth as he makes his way on around here ahead of Stefan Albanese by 1 second at the finish line as he finishes P4 for the privateer outfit ahead of the DRS eSport driver. It'll there be Espresso Brienne there, P6 in the G3 Silver class, with Matthew Addy and Jack Bark having already finished their races a lap down. And we do still have a number of bronze drivers in the G3 class to come to the line, including Racing Team Astra Sean Scooter, who they're just behind what is Russell Fowler as he comes on around, and Fowler there will be just ahead of him firstly as they make the way on through. A difficult day for Russell Fowler in the Formsling Esports Mercedes, and then we can see Sean Scooter wrapping up the G3 bronze podium there as he crosses the line in the number 12 car, P29 overall. We've got a couple more finishes still to come, including Elwyn Sykes, who has run out of fuel, I think, at the very end. So Elwyn Sykes will not finish the race. I think he's hoping for somebody to push him along, but he's by his lonesome there. But a difficult one for Elwyn Sykes, but he will be P4 classified technically, I think. But unless he has to be towed to the pits, which means he'll lose a lap, and if so, Ingar Elmclub could potentially finish P4. I think Sykes here a little bit cautious and hoping somebody can give him a push, but I don't think anybody will be able to. But meanwhile, as we see our drivers going around for their cool-down laps, if they've got enough fuel to do so, Benjamin McCluskey here for NXTGEN Racing Purple, fighting all the way. And P2 in the end for the outfit there. It's a 1-2 today for NXTGEN Racing Purple in the LMDH Gold class. A well-deserved one at that, and a brilliant drive from them. Jamie Dorey in the end, he had the strategy, he just did not quite have the pace, and also cost himself some time in the mid-stint of the race. But still, the number 13 driver, they'll be happy with the podium and know that things will continue to go ever so more down to the wire in class. And there's our drivers that make the way on around. We have had confirmation that Elwyn Sykes has been classified as P4 in the GT3 bronze class, and with that we can now show you the race results subject to Eddie Stewart's inquiries, and here they are. So after a brilliant 2 hours of racing action here today at Le Mans Circuit in round 7 of the Proto GT3 Championship Season 2, brought to you by NXTGEN Racing on iRacing, Gaz Williams taking the overall win for NXTGEN Racing Purple in the BMW M V8 Hybrid LMDH machine, ahead of teammate Benjamin McCluskey there. It's 1-2 for them overall, and in terms of the LMDH Gold podium, ahead of Jamie Dorey, who finished P3 for NXTGEN Racing Orange. It's the NXTGEN Racing lockout on the LMDH and overall podium, ahead of Craig Jones of SCCR SimSports, who did well to beat Magna Yolland in the end and hold off Paul Williams as well, with Paul Williams there, your LMDH Silver winner for Speed9 Esports, finishing behind the SCCR SimSports driver a further 14 seconds off in P5. Magna Yolland battling to P6 there for Team Slow-Mo Black, ahead of Mark Baker for Speed9 Esports to finish P7, P2 in the LMDH Silver class, and then Barrie Jarman for SCCR SimSports bringing home a 1-2 alongside teammate Kevin Stringer there for the team in the LMP2 class, P1, P2 in class. Mark Sykes there, finishing off the top 10 overall, and a P3 finish there for NXTGEN Racing Orange despite his injuries. Best of the rest there, Nigel Stock, the privateer, P11, in a race that wasn't to go his way today after instant defeating himself and Kevin Stringer on the opening lap. Saw Stock into the barrier on the exit of the first of the Mulsanne chicanes. Eric Benson, then your winner overall in the GT3 category, and your GT3 Gold winner there in a surprise turnaround for Team Slow-Mo, P12 overall, ahead of Gavin Gardner for NXTGEN Racing Pink. And Rocket Racing Stars is Deegan Fairclough, who with that late pit stop to take on fuel, he couldn't get to the end and had to take a quick sip and run back onto the circuit. But still finishing close behind, and all three drivers there in a brilliant effort. We carry on by focusing with our podium finishers in the overall standings. And as we can see, they're P18 in a superb drive, and perhaps one of the standout drives of the season. Rossum Universal Robots and Daniel Stillman there taking the GT3 bronze win ahead of the GT3 silver class winner. And we can see that articulated as we look further down with Jordan Bay, while following through only 1.5 seconds behind at the finish. The Ferrari driver there, the privateer, fighting hard but not quite able to upset the balance of the Rossum Universal Robots Mercedes driver. Ollie Wayne completes the overall top 20 with the win in the GT3 silver class, making the move right at the end in the drag race down the Mulsanne straight when it was a close battle on strategy between himself and Paul Scott for NXTGEN Racing Purple versus NXTGEN Racing Orange. Paul Scott P2 in the silver class, and then Baz Meacher recovering to P3 in the GT3 silver class. Again, a huge achievement and one of the drivers of the season. Stefan Vessels there, P23 for Racing Team Astra, separated the top three of the GT3 Silver class from the rest of their peers. And as we continue our way on down the overall finishing positions, we can see there in P29, third place in the GT3 Bronze class for Racing Team Astra, Sean Scooter there rounds off another solid performance for the South African outfit. But those are all of our overall finishes and their positions. And we can see the two retirements there of Chris Daines for NXTGEN Racing Pink and Mark Arrowsmith, the privateer, respecting the LMDH Gold and the GT3 Silver classes, retiring 10 and 23 laps from the finish. And now as we come onto our individual class finishing positions, starting with the LMDH Gold class, we can see Gaz Williams there taking the win by 22.3 seconds in the end by taking one less pit stop compared to his teammate Benjamin McCluskey. It's 1-2 for NXTGEN Racing Purple ahead of NXTGEN Racing Orange's Jamie Dorey. Round off at NXTGEN Podium. And then Craig Jones at P4 there for SCCR SimSports. 24 seconds clear of Magna Yolland for Team Slow-Mo Black, with Chris Daines our one and only retirement in the LMDH Gold class today. 10 laps from the end for NXTGEN Racing Pink. We then come on to the LMDH Silver class. And we can see after 2 hours of racing, Paul Williams taking the win for Speed9 Esports ahead of his teammate Mark Baker by 28.5 seconds, albeit very close between the two of them for the opening hour, but a major incident costing Mark Baker dear in the second half of the race, and therefore seeing him finish quite a way behind. We then come on to the LMP2 class. And we can see here that it's Barrie Jarman who makes it another 1-2 for SCCR SimSports ahead of teammate Kevin Stringer by 38.3 seconds. And Mark Sykes round off the podium there, 2 minutes off the winner, with Nigel Stock closing behind, but not quite able to get close enough to take P3 from the NXTGEN Racing Orange driver. We then come on to the GT3 classes, and we start off with the GT3 Gold class. And we can see in that surprise result, Eric Benson for Team Slow-Mo taking the win by 1.2 seconds over Gavin Garner for NXTGEN Racing Pink. And Gavin Garner really having to knock on the door hard of every Team Slow-Mo driver to find his way on through. And I think he might be thinking, was he cost the time he needed to win this race when he had to battle his way past the likes of Frederik Stensvold Dorey, Jochen Siegert and Ole Martin Mjork. But still, I think all on reflection, he'll be giving himself a huge pat on the back for finishing P2. And the same for Eric Benson taking the win. Deegan Fairclough, meanwhile, with that loss of fuel right at the end, having to take the extra fuel on, and the Rocket Racing Stars driver finishing 6 seconds off the winners, but still he'll look to bounce back next round. That's a certainty. Frederik Stensvold Dorey just off of the podium there, P4 for Team Slow-Mo ahead of teammate Jochen Siegert, with the trio of teammates of Ole Martin Mjork there completing the group in P6, and then Stefan Vessels Racing Team Astra, not to be his day today, finishing P7 ahead of Magnus Fullerton and Russell Fowler rounding off the standings there. Not a lap down, but definitely not on the pace, and well, the Performance Link Esports driver just not enjoying Le Mans, it would seem, but still a number of rounds to go, and we know that this is not going to be the final summary of Fowler's championship campaign. We'll see him bounce back, that's a certainty. We then come to the GT3 Silver class, and we can see Ollie Wayne there taking the win in the end for NXTGEN Racing Purple, ahead of NXTGEN Racing Orange's Paul Scott by only 2.5 tenths at the line in an absolute brilliant climax to the battle for the win. Ahead of Baz Meacher, only finished a further 1.5 seconds off, having gone all the way to the back of the field from an early pit stop due to damage on the opening lap, but the Welshman fighting his way to P3, ahead of Ben Bennyworth P4, and then Stefan Albanese for DRS Esports round off the top 5. Espresso Rien P6 there for Team Slow-Mo left leftovers ahead of Matthew Addy, finishing a lap down alongside Jack Barker, and Mark Arrowsmith retiring at 19 laps from the finish there, the privateer P9. We then lastly come on to the G3 bronze class. And we can see Daniel Stillman there taking the win for Rossum's Universal Robots by 1.3 seconds over Jordan Bebois. And definitely now a force to be contended with the Mercedes driver. And I think Bebois feels as though he's done plenty today to keep his championship lead alive. But he'll be wary of the fact that Stillman is looking ever more threatening. Sean Scudder, meanwhile, finishing at P3 there for Racing Team Astra. Another solid run to a podium for the South African. Ahead of his teammate Elwin Sykes there, confirmed P4. Despite finishing a lap down and running out of fuel. Not technically making the checkered flag. But he's been classified as P4, and Ingot Almclough round off the top 5 there for Team Slomo leftovers. Jorge Santos P6 ahead of Artie Chatzkonstantou, who of course joined by his teammate and his brother Kostat Chatzkonstantou over the course of the race. They shared the car. Congratulations to all of our drivers for finishing the race, and a special congratulations to our class winners. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for us to take a breather before we bring you your post-round interviews with our volunteer drivers. Indeed, today was a race all about strategy and consistency. We saw many a driver getting it wrong, but a good number of drivers got it absolutely right. And it'll be interesting to hear our drivers' thoughts on what has been a tough day and perhaps the toughest race of the season so far. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in 10 minutes for the post-round interviews. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for our post-round interviews with our volunteer drivers. And today we have got 5 drivers technically, albeit 4 different representatives on the field, on the circuit. And indeed, we'll be kicking off very shortly with the driver pair of Artie and Costa Chatsconstantinou in the GT3 bronze class. The privateer outfit that worked together today, the 2 brothers, in order to bring the car home. And whilst it may have been at the back of the GT3 bronze field, they deserve a round of applause all the same, and a little bit of a spotlight shown on them. Before we do come on to then our LMP2 winner for today from SCCR SimSports, Barrie Jarman, in the number 8 LMP2 at Dallara P217. We'll then be hearing from Daniel Stimmer in the number 75 Mercedes AMG Evo in the GT3 bronze class, who drove a very well-managed race from start to finish for Rossum's Universal Robots to take the class win. And then we'll be hearing from NXTGEN Racing Orange's Paul Scott in the 85 Audi, the GT3 Silver driver there, missing out on the win by only minor margins come the very end. But as we kick off then our post-round interviews, we are firstly joined by the pair of what is their Artie and Costa Chatsconstantinou. Gentlemen, good evening to you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you all right. I'm pretty sure Costa can. He sat literally right next to me, but he's on a different device for some reason. Yeah.
That's no problem. Well, welcome to the interview room. It's great to have you both with me this evening. And, well, what a race it was for yourselves in the end. You may not have been up there battling for the win, but still, surviving at Le Mans is an achievement in of itself. I have to ask, going into tonight, how were you feeling for the race at Le Mans in general?
I was feeling quite confident. The car felt really good 3 days ago, and then the update happened, but I'm not really sure that played any part in the performance tonight. But the clutch fuel saving method, I was sort of relying on that. But yeah, it's fast in practice, but it just wasn't meant to be.
Well, it's unfortunate it wasn't quite the way you wanted it to start, but you did have a good start to the race as we just start to take a look back at the formation start. Relatively calm and simple start, despite the GT3s all beginning through the forward chicanes. I have to ask, what's it like when you start in the midst of some of the slowest corners and tightest corners on the circuit?
You sort of, do I send it or do I don't send it? I wanted to push as hard as I can, but then I just remembered it's a very long race. Anything can happen, but it was just crazy.
Indeed, and speaking of the start of the races, we are just about to take a look at how everybody got underway with the formation start. What was your strategy going into this race? Did you have a particular, before the instance occurred, did you think about, okay, we're going to change tyres at this particular stop, or alternatively, was it just play and see how things go as the race evolves?
I was sort of relying on what everyone else did. I was planning to go longer than I did, but then I couldn't really continue because I got quite bad cramp in my leg. So then Costa got in the car, and then the incident happened. But I think it was going to be a straightforward race until about an hour in. Like the first hour, I don't know what was up with me. My pace was incredible. Well, incredible for me. This is probably seen from the past races.
Indeed, and well, we'll come on to the incident regarding your leg very shortly. We'll speak to Costa his feelings, but as the race went on, we saw a relatively calm start from yourself, and then, of course, as the field starts to open up, Le Mans, a very long lap, just shy of 4 minutes in length for the GT3 class machine, and when you haven't got too many drivers around you after those early battles, what stops you from switching off at Le Mans?
Just determination, really. If you get bored, you fall back, and you just got to keep pushing. Got to think, yeah, I'm gaining 2 tenths a lap on him. It's gonna be 10 laps to catch him. But yeah, sort of fell asleep towards the end of it. But yeah, it's just one of those races, isn't it? Very long lap, not really many corners in the first part of the lap. But yeah, it's quite good.
Oh, indeed, and well, speaking about the cramp in your leg, Artie, of course, not nice when it does happen. I can relate personally when it's happened in the past on the simulator. But then carrying it to your brother Costa, who took over the car. Of course, this wasn't expected at any point, so I have to ask you, Costa, jumping into the car, you've not driven the car in the state it's in, and you're taking on Le Mans of all circuits. That must be incredibly daunting.
Yeah, it was. Honestly, I had no clue what was going on in the car. I had a few moments of oversteer. And I knew getting in the car, my job was just to keep it in one piece, don't do anything stupid, let everyone who was lapping us by. But yeah, it was a really good to see what the league was like. I was looking a few rounds because obviously RT always like promotes it and stuff. So yeah, I said to him, if you get too bad, do you want me to take over? And he was like, no, no, no. And I was like, he called me up and said, I need to get out of the car. I'm having bad cramp in my leg. So I rushed back in and just took over, and yeah, pretty good.
Well, indeed, you were putting the laps together left, right and centre out there, and well, whilst you're at the late stage of the race, of course, taking a car over that's been worn down, the tyres, of course, needing some management, and also the fuel being concerned. I have to ask, finding it out there with the LMPs and the LMDHs finding the way on through as well, you didn't look troubled by it at all, you just looked like you were naturally in the car. Do you do much GT3 racing yourself?
I used to before I took a break off sim racing in late December because basically I had a bit of a falling out with the team, and then I just decided to give up on iRacing, but now I'm trying to get back into it. And I'm going to be having a look into this league next season if it goes ahead. But yeah, if we look back on my sim racing career, I've done a few like mini endurance races. I did the Motorsport UK Brit Car race around Silverstone on iRacing, which was pretty cool experience. But yeah, my aim was just to keep my head down and just keep concentrating. But yeah, it was good.
Well, indeed, it goes well, and hopefully we will see you in a car of your own in future series hosted by NXTGEN. More on that in the future, no doubt. But then coming back to yourself, Artie, of course, having to jump back in the car for the final 15 minutes. You've been away from the car, your leg cramp has gone away. Looked good to begin with, and then a bit of a nasty incident.
Yeah, I jumped back in the car, and I think when Costa was getting out my sim, he knocked the wheel. So it was a bit higher, so I was sort of reaching for it, if you know what I mean. But coming out the pits, it was a bit of a sort of shock because I didn't know where I was in the race. I was sort of half asleep, really, not really concentrating. But yeah, a couple of LMDHs and other GT3s passed me by, a lot faster guys. Yeah, but the incident, that is, I'm pretty sure you're going to get onto that in a minute. But all until then, I thought I've got good pace. Didn't really have good pace in the end, but yeah.
Well, indeed, but you're keeping it consistent, and that's the main thing, of course, and bringing those lap times down comes with time. But then coming on to the instant, heading down the Mulsanne straight, and it just looked as though a tyre dipped to the grass.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of round off the corner as much as possible, just to carry as much speed as I probably could into the chicane, but in the later stage of the race, you're more thinking of getting to the checkered flag, but I don't know where I was thinking, but then the car sort of went round, I was feeling going round, went straight the other way, and if it was just a normal barrier, it would have been completely fine, maybe a bit of suspension damage because I got back to the pit lane, but it went straight into a wall, car was done, couldn't move the car at all. Couple of meters further and I would have been in the middle of the track, which would have caused problems for the guy in the rocket, I think it was, who passed me. But yeah, it's not the best way to sort of end the race, but I'm glad the car could get back out on track and sort of take the checkered flag as well. But yeah, looking forward to Monza. That's a very good track in the BMW, I think. So yeah, looking forward to that one.
Oh, indeed. And coming on to Monza, of course, like you say, BMW very strong on the straights, and Monza, one of its circuits that does quite well. But personally for you, how much do you enjoy Monza as a circuit? Because, of course, some would say Monza and Turn 1 are probably the scariest words you can hear in a single sentence.
I guess it just depends how aggressive and sensible you are in the car at Monza. If you're going to Turn 1, I think, especially in the sprint race next week, I think someone's going to fly up the inside and take people out. It's just one of those things that happens at Monza. But I think my strategy for next week is just play it sensible, make up positions from other people's mistakes, and then see what happens in the feature race.
We definitely look forward to seeing how you get on in a week's time. But just before we do let you both go, I should say, starting with yourself, Artie, is there anybody you'd like to give it a shout out to live on the broadcast this evening, or a thank you?
Well, first of all, Mark in the LMP, I think he's in LMP2, not LMDH, but yeah, racing with an injury is quite good, to be honest. He's got mega pace. I've also got some friends watching, well, I hope they're watching, sort of, before the incident, yeah, I've got some friends watching the race tonight, so hello to them if you're still watching. Sort of let you down by crashing, but yeah, good race.
Well, I'm sure they'll appreciate the shout out, Artie. And coming to yourself, Costa, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to beyond who Artie's mentioned?
I just want to give a massive shout out to Artie for letting me drive, because he knew I've done no practice, and then he just let me step into the car and just do my thing, really.
Well, it's great to see you two both working together, indeed, brothers on and off the circuit, and well, it shines on through. But with that, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure to have you both, and well, Artie, we look forward to seeing how you get on in a week's time at Monza, but until then, we wish you both a lovely evening. So hearing that there from Artie and Costa Chatsconstanantu, the GT3 bronze pair, they're taking over the number 22 privateer car for today's racing. Of course, as we heard, it was Artie behind the car originally, but due to a leg cramp, he had to hand the car over to Costa, who stood in, and indeed, what brotherly love there for his brother to come on in and take over the car for a sizable stint of the race, a good 40 minutes, and well, as he made his way on around, I think it was 40 minutes, may have been a little bit longer. They may have been running towards the back, but whether they're at the front of the field or towards the back, we here at Next Gen, and we care about everybody out on the circuit. And of course, it's not just the front runners who make the racing, it's also those battling for the midfield and the lower places. And we look forward to seeing how Artie, when he's back behind the car next week at Monza, how he can get on at the Italian Temple of Speed. But congratulations to them for making the end of the race despite that nasty incident, only 10 minutes on the finish line. As we come from our first interviewee, then we now come on to our second interviewee, and that is Barrie Jarman, the LMP2 driver for SCCR SimSports, in what was a dominant display today from the number 8 driver. And as we get ready to interview him, of course, it'll be interesting to hear his perspective from the start to the end of the race in terms of what looked to be a very close run at the beginning, but gradually it became more and more a race going his way. But as he does join me now in the interview room, Barrie, it's lovely to have you here, of course, brilliant insight from yourself in the build-up to today, and well, it all played out, and it looked as though it was the perfect day at Le Mans for yourself.
Hi, Paul. Yeah, it was good. I think it was funny. I skimmed through the your coverage, and I don't think I appeared in the stream once. But yeah, it was completely uneventful race. It was just 2 hours of making sure I got the car around.
Well, there were a couple of idle moments where we did catch you, but like you say, it was uneventful for yourself after what was quite a dramatic start where you're able to break away from your teammate Kevin Stringer and also Mark Sykes and Nigel Stock behind. Of course, Kevin in contact with Stock, that's a separate incident in its entirety. We saw you really put the pace down and hammer off into distance. Was that always the plan, to try and just make the breakaway early on?
Yeah, well, obviously there's as we discussed before the race, there's the downforce that you get from this car. So when you've got fresh rubber and that high downforce, it's a very different lap that you put in for the first 2 or 3 laps before the tyres start to wear. So it's really a case of every time you come in from a pit stop, just absolutely hammer those first 2 or 3 laps out. And I was a good kind of 2.5 seconds ahead of P2 at the start of every stint as I came back out. Yeah, and at the start it was just a case of I saw Mark behind me, and bless him with his mangled arm. I knew in all respect to Mark, he wasn't going to be able to keep up with me because he's literally driving with one arm. So as long as Kev was behind him and Mark was between us, I thought, right, I can just put the hammer down and build up a gap.
Indeed, and in building up that gap very gradually at first and really starting to hammer it home as time wore on, you seem to be in a one-man race in the end. But of course, when you're out there on your own at Le Mans, it's a 3.5 minute plus lap, and in the Dallara P217, a very lively and exciting machine. But how do you avoid yourself from switching off over the course of 2 hours of racing at Le Mans?
I think that's where it helps to be in a team. We talk to each other constantly. So for most of the race, we're comparing lap times, we're talking about tyre deg, When I'm getting a call from crew chief to come in for pit stop, I'm communicating that to Kev so he remembers to come in. So, it's almost as if I'm his spotter and he's my spotter. So we're making sure we constantly communicate. And apart from that, I mean, it's not really a concentration issue beyond the first pit stop, because that up to that first pit stop, there's nobody else around. That's when you really have to concentrate. But beyond that point, you're coming across a GT3 car every kind of a quarter, third of a lap, so it kind of keeps you sharp anyway.
Oh, indeed. And to that point, how did you find navigating the traffic, given this circuit has so many extended straights and also quite wide open entry points to corners? Did it feel as smooth sailing as perhaps you anticipated?
Yeah, it wasn't too bad. It's typical endurance patience, really, and just accepting that if you've lost 5 seconds to the person behind you, it's going to happen to them at some point during the race. I've done the official iRacing events at Le Mans a few times, so I've kind of learned over time, this is where you can overtake, this is where you can't overtake. So as long as you're not getting frustrated, you can generally keep it pretty clean. I managed to get through the entire race without even picking up an instant point, so yeah, pretty happy with that.
Well, that's an achievement, given the fact we saw so many drivers picking up slowdowns over the course of the lap, particularly on the exit of Chequered and also on the Mulsanne chicanes, and for yourself not to pick up a single instant point. Well, I think many will be looking right now and asking the question how, but still, testament to your driving ability. And on the strategy, we saw you play quite a standard strategy, and in terms of a 4-stop, was the strategy you executed the one you always expected to use, or did you mix it up at all?
This is where we'll be honest to say we didn't have a strategy. We realised about 10 minutes into the race, I on the radio with Kev, and I said, you do realise we haven't run 2 hours and we don't know if there's a strategy to be had here. Should we be fuel saving? And we both said, look, we're building up a gap. He wasn't going to try and do any kind of fuel safe strat to get ahead of me, and we would just have said, right, well, let's just go out there and run it, and if we need to splash and dash at the end, then we will. As it happened with the LMP2s, it didn't line up that any kind of fuel saving strategy would have gained position, so we were lucky. As I understand it, that wasn't the case with the GT3s, and that fuel strat really came into it, which was super exciting. So I'm going to watch back the stream later and see what happened.
Well, indeed, fuel played a major part also in the LMDHs, but not necessarily for the LMP2s. But of course, in the end, a very simply thought out strategy for yourself after what was a little bit of a discussion with your teammate Kevin, and bringing it on home in what was an absolutely flawless run from start to finish. I have to ask, after taking the win today, how are you feeling for Monza in a week's time?
I'll be honest, Paul. I'll be happy to get round this track. I absolutely despise Monza. That first chicane, it just kills me. I'm okay through the 2 Lesmo, but yeah, it's that first chicane. I just feel like a beginner every time. So I think it's gonna be very different next week. I highly anticipate Kev will take the win. I know he likes Monza, but yeah, we'll see how it plays out.
Oh, well, we look forward to seeing how you get on at Monza. And just a quick word with regards to, of course, we talk about Kevin, but also your teammate Craig Jones. We did see him in quite a back-and-forth battle with Magna Jonland over the entirety of the race. We saw a couple of months where you two shared parts of the track together. Jones battling back to P4 after having to make 6 pit stops.
Yeah, obviously a lot of frustration from him at the start. He's had quite a few issues the last few races, literally in the first 10 minutes of every race, coming together and having to take one of the fast repairs. But yeah, he did a fantastic job of battling his way back through the field, and of course, more importantly, helping to pick up more championship points.
Well, indeed, and all those points go a long way when you're in a tight championship battle for P2 through to P1 in the Teams Championship, and SCCR SimSports right up there pushing the boundaries. But just before we do let you go, Barry, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Well, given last time you asked me that question, and I said I'd like to thank Kev for not rear-ending me and taking me out the race, and my wife said, oh, thanks very much. So yeah, I'd like to say thank you to my wife for being particularly patient with me for being able to do these races every Wednesday evening. So yes, thank you.
Well, I'm sure she'll appreciate the gratitude. But with that, Barry, it's been a pleasure to have you in the interview room. Congratulations once again on a superb drive to victory, and we look forward to seeing how you get on at Monza in a week's time.
Thank you, Paul.
All the best. So hearing there from Barrie Jarman, our LMP2 winner today, taking the win for SCCR SimSports in what was superb fashion from start to finish, driving hard, driving fast, and really pushing the boundary in class, and in the end steering clear of Kevin Stringer, his teammate. You can see the two of them exchanging sharing the same image there as they made the way on down the moles and straight, and really SCCR SimSports delivering on the racing action today, making it a 1-2 and plenty more points coming their way as we get to the ever more critical point of the championship season when it comes to the team's championship. But of course, now we go from our second interview of today to our third interview very shortly, and we'll be hearing from very shortly none other than Rossum's Universal Robots' Daniel Stimon, the GT3 bronze winner today, and what a fantastic drive from start to finish for the Czech Republic driver. Looked absolutely faultless out there, and indeed the only pressure in the end was Jordan Baybois at a distance, who tried to keep him honest all the way. But as he gets ready to join me now, it'll be interesting to hear his perspective on what looked to be a race that was constantly in his control. Well, as he joins me now in the interview room, Daniel, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us, and well, it's been a pleasure to see just such a strong performance from yourself in the Mercedes-AMG Evo. We've had a BOP update for the car, but that didn't seem to matter too much. You seem to be in complete control to start and finish. How do you feel about taking the win at Le Mans?
Thank you. Hello all. Yeah, so I was practicing entire weekend, and finally, because I was driving before endurance, so this is my really favorite game, so I'm very awesome. Yeah, great race, and what to say, I still getting breath.
Oh, goodness me. Well, you definitely put in a lot of effort out there, and just starting from the beginning, we saw you very quickly carving your way through the bronze field. You looked absolutely monstrous on that opening stint. Was your plan literally just to carve your way through at the start? Because the pace was absurd.
Right, so I seen obviously pace yesterday in practices, but for me it's important guys from my group obviously, so I was looking more like back on Jordan, sorry, I can't remember that name, that Norway guy. So yeah, I was just afraid that I wouldn't get somebody who would be on the same pace like me, and he would delay me, and Jordan would crash me, so that was more like looking into mirror than getting fast pace, I just don't want make mistake, which I did, but still I was good enough.
Oh, indeed. And with regards to the Norwegian you're referring to, that would be Ingar Almklov. We saw Baybois and Almklov both try to match you for pace after the first stint, but you always seem to have the advantage, or in Baybois' case, there was a 6-second gap, and you seemed to maintain it. Was that more of a, you were pushing 100% at that point, or were you trying to match his pace to, were you trying to match your pace to Baybois'?
Right, so at first stint, I was just go, didn't think about nothing, just don't make mistake. I was not thinking about second stint because I met Paul Scott just after pace, and he was on similar pace, and I wasn't sure because he's silver. I wasn't sure what is his pace exactly. I didn't want to delay him, but in case he would be a bit slower, he would delay me, and Jordan would obviously get me. So I was just more thinking about Paul at second stint, and in that third stint, that started that I see that Jordan got probably speeding in pits, so he was 15 seconds behind me. But I driving VR, so that's very difficult to driving in 2 hours. So I was a bit sweaty then, and some drop of sweat fell into my eye. So I was reflexively touch my eye, So, and that was just before Indianapolis where I did that mistake. So I lost that gap, and then it was just fight with myself, because I seen Jordan just get closer and closer, especially on that long straight. So Yeah, that was fight, and more, just before finish, I was fighting myself. Yeah.
Oh, indeed, it was close towards the end, and we saw Barrie Jarman get very close within a couple of seconds at the finish line, but you held on to take the win. And indeed, we've seen you battling for the podium throughout this season, and now taking the win in the endurance race here sets you up really nicely for the races remaining. But I have to ask, with regards to the Mercedes, we've seen it be one of those cars that's not been on the pace this season, but you seem to be making it work. Are you a big fan of the Mercedes?
Not really, not really. By if I could pick, I like McLaren probably, but because I was driving endurances most of my career, like so that was always about that. There was three people, everyone was different cars, so I was driving always car which someone else want or would we get deal on, so. I just sit in Mercedes, and that fit to me. So I'm driving it. I feel well in it, and I don't want to starting from scratch on the new car. Yeah, so that's the whole job.
Well, that's fair play, because you're making it look like you're very comfortable in that Mercedes. And, well, speaking of Ferraris, we go to Ferrari's home turf of Monza in a week's time. How are you feeling for the Italian Temple of Speed?
I hate Monza. I really hate Monza. Greetings to Italia. But it's one of those tracks which is driven on endurances. Really, usually. So I know that track. I hate it, but I know that track. Yeah. So I hope I don't lose much. I need gaining points. So I lost many points on start because Silverstone is that track which I don't like and don't know how to drive it. So there I lost a lot, and now I'm just catching them, so I must be fast as possible until last lap of season.
Oh, indeed. And speaking of the championship briefly, going into tonight, you're battling to be inside the top three, and with this result, you'll definitely be right up there. It's looking very close between yourself, Benoit, Almklov, and Sykes, albeit you're a bit of an outsider. But how are you feeling about your chances of taking the crown?
Well, it's not that much far, but unfortunately that point system is done that I will get, like 5 points more only for the endurance. So even if I would win everything and Jordan would be second, I probably can't catch it. Maybe in theory, but so I will do my best, obviously, but I don't think there is a real chance for it.
Well, you never know, never say never, and we look forward to seeing how you get on in Italy in a week's time. But just before we let you go, Daniel, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out to or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Yes, so obviously my teammate Alan Racy is supporting me all the time, and we're sticking together a long time, so I would like to send greetings to him, to family back home, and guys which looking on me, Tony in Belfast and Paul in Prague. That's all. Thank you.
I'm sure they'll appreciate the shout out and the thank you, Daniel. But with that, congratulations once again on a superb drive to victory. It's been a pleasure to have you in the interview room, and we look forward to seeing you at Italy in a week's time.
Okay, thank you. Have a nice day.
You too. All the best.
Bye.
So hearing there from Daniel Stimon, our GT3 bronze class winner today for Rossum's Universal Robots, taking P18 overall, and with it, of course, finishing ahead of your GT3 silver class winner of Ollie Wayne as well. Absolutely looked in control, particularly in that first stint, and looked infallible. And as we see here in the pictures of Ingo Almklov following behind and Jordan Baywa trying to give chase, well, in the end, Stillman made less mistakes compared to his peers, and that's what enabled him to really open that gap up. And even when there were some critical mistakes, they never quite disturbed him enough in order to stop him from running the car home to victory. And whilst he may not say that the Mercedes were his favourites, talking more about the McLaren, I'd say he's definitely right now very acclimatised to the Mercedes AMG Evo, because he was roaring on through there, and I can definitely say making the German machine work the dream. But can he continue that with 3 rounds to go? He's an outsider in terms of the GT3 Bronze Championship, but if results go his way in the next couple of rounds, he could be right in there in contention come the season finale. We will have to wait and see. But speaking of waiting and seeing, ladies and gentlemen, he's been waiting to be joining me in the interview room for some time. But as we get ready for our final interview of this evening, it's going to be none other than Paul Scott in the GT3 Silver class, our next-gen racing orange driver, who in the end missed out on the win by only a couple of attempts at the finish line. But as he gets ready to join me now, it'll be interesting to hear the dynamic of his race versus Ollie Wayne, and how in the end it didn't quite work out, but what he can take from today going into the remaining rounds. Well, as he joins me now in the interview room, Paul, it wasn't quite to be today. It was a run to the finish line between yourself and Ollie Wayne in a 2-hour strategic and on-track battle. But still, you gave it everything to come home P2 and one of your strongest performances of the season. I have to ask, does it feel like heartbreak, or are there plenty of positives to take from today?
Hey, mate. Lots of positives. I really enjoyed it. Absolutely enjoyed it. It was, if only I'd have had a bit more nous about me, and I'd saved a little bit more fuel. Having to splash and dash literally on the last, just as the last lap started. Just, that was a nightmare. But it meant that I could keep up with Ollie and have that race with Ollie, because we were both absolutely gunning it. And if I'd have tried to save any fuel, he'd have just gone. I wouldn't. The amount of time I'd have lost saving fuel, we wouldn't have been able to race at the end like that.
Oh, indeed. It looked very tight on strategy and also on pace between the two of you. And we have seen over the last couple of rounds the pace really come alive from both of you, starting back in Belgium. But focusing a bit more on yourself, we saw at the start you make quite a good getaway from the formation lap starting line, with all the field, of course, starting between the forward chicane curves. It looked a bit chaotic in there, but you found a way through.
It was a bit chaotic. I nearly ran into the back of someone. Somebody slammed on the brakes for some reason. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it was very tight. I think I only saw 1 or 2 incidents as well, which is really good. So yeah, I did manage to get away quite cleanly. However, I did lose probably 5 or 6 seconds to the front pack, and once they'd gone, I had no chance of catching them up.
And it's interesting with that loss of time, and then on the opening stint, really having to try and make up for time and also potentially adjust strategy. And I have to ask, did you at any point start to tweak your strategy, given that you'd lost a pack of cars?
Once I realised how fast the Mercedes was down the straight line after the update, once Daniel, who you've just been speaking to, got in front of me, that was when I sort of thought, right, I'll sit behind him. And I tried to fuel save as much as possible. But then once I saw Ollie coming, catching up, I knew that I had to go. And it was foot down for the rest of the way.
Well, indeed, it was interesting to see the attitude between the two of you, because at one point we were talking about over the course of the race how it's the two class leaders constantly back and forth between one another. But then, like you say, when Ollie started to get closer, it's almost as if it gave you a kick up a gear to say, right, you've got to get past Stimman and run away with things now. But I have to ask, with that in mind, and of course this circuit being very aggressive on fuel consumption and also the tyre wear, how did you find that balancing act of needing to use the fuel and use the tyres, but also you've got to try and preserve them as much as possible, and you've got to deal with the risk of traffic coming through and making you go off of racing line at certain points?
Yeah, I've been really unlucky with the traffic in the previous races, but today it was actually quite an easy thing to navigate. With the really long straights, obviously it's quite an easy thing for the LMDH and the LMP cars to just blast through. But yeah, it's when I forgot what I said. Where was I? Could you repeat that again, Paul? Your question.
So it's about the balancing act of the LMDHs coming on through in the LMP2s, and also imagine that tyre wear and the fuel consumption all in one.
That's right. Yeah. Sorry. It was actually the most difficult period of the race for me was when I just came out of the pits. The first 2 laps, it took at least 2 laps to light up the tyres. So as you were coming towards the end of the Porsche curves, the car just wanted to snap at the rear. It was horrible. I can remember having to lift so much to get through the Porsche curves. And I'll be honest with you, it didn't feel like at the end of the stint that you needed to change tyres. It's just that with one of the recent updates, you can change tyres and it doesn't actually cost you any time because you're filling up the tank. So you can change tyres and fill up at the same time now. So it always makes sense to take the tyres if you're filling up a full tank. It's just the tyres that you've just been running for the past 40 minutes actually felt better than the new tyres for at least 5 or 6 minutes. It's quite scary the first couple of laps.
Well, goodness me, I can imagine that balancing act and having to really wear in a new set of tyres rather than rely on the old ones. And of course, new to the GT3s going into this round was the update to the ABS system. We know that the Audi can be very sketchy off braking into certain corners, particularly heavy braking zones. How did you feel the ABS changes made a difference to the car?
Well, with the brake balance, you can normally knock it back quite drastically with the GT3s, but I found that I could only put it back maybe 2 or 3 points, if that, anymore. And yeah, you start to struggle. So that took a little bit of getting used to. But it's not too bad. The Audi's really good at getting out of the corners with the 4-wheel drive. But yeah, lift off oversteer is the main thing that you have to worry about. As soon as you lift off the accelerator, the back end just wants to start coming around. So that's probably the hardest thing to control.
We did see a number of drivers fall foul of that through the Porsche curves. Yourself, however, keeping it pointed in a straight line. And then coming back to the battle with Ollie, of course, you've gone through your first 2 pit stops. It's all looking well and good. And then I have to ask, at what point did you look down at the fuel gauge and say, I haven't got enough to do that final lap?
But in all fairness, probably only about 3 or 4 laps before I knew I had to pit, before I actually had to pit. I was so fixated on racing with Ollie that, yeah, when it came to that point, the fuel strategy sort of just went out the window. And I just one track mind, just simple, go as fast as you can for as long as you can. And yeah, I was quite lucky that Ollie had the same plan and he had to splash and dash as well at the end. But yeah, quite close on the last lap. It's just that Mercedes going down the straights was ridiculous.
Oh, indeed. We saw that as you made your way out the pit lane, you managed to fend off Ollie, albeit a little bit door-to-door between the two of you through the Dunlop chicane. But again, you managed to set your differences quite nicely. And then, as you say, heading down the Mulsanne, got ahead of you in the run to the first chicane. And, well, we couldn't quite watch it as the race was concluding elsewhere. But it just looked as though the V10 of the Audi not able to take the fight back to the Mercedes V8.
No, because of the overspeed that Ollie had, obviously I was coming out of the pits. And he had the overspeed coming around the first corner. I knew that he was going to run slightly wide at that corner, so I stayed to the right. It may have looked like we touched, but I don't think we did. But as we were then going through the first sector, unfortunately we had an LMDH car that was in a rush to get through, and as we were going round one of the corners, it actually tapped my right hand side and completely just knocked my racing line, and I was a sitting duck. Like, there was nothing I could do. Unfortunate.
Well, indeed, that is unfortunate, but still, when it comes down to such fine margins in the end, like you said at the start of this interview, plenty of positives to take away. And of course, we head to Monza in a week's time for another sprint and feature combination in round number 8. How are you feeling for the Italian Temple of Speed?
I love Monza, one of my favourite tracks, so I might not have the pace, but I absolutely love driving around that track. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Well, that's brilliant to hear, and we look forward to seeing how you get on there in a week's time. But just before we let you go, Paul, is there anybody you'd like to give a shout out or a thank you to live on the broadcast this evening?
Just all the guys in the admin team. Thank you for their continuing efforts and hard work. That's about it.
I'm sure the NXTGEN admins will appreciate your kind words, Paul, but with that, it's been a pleasure to have you in the interview room. As always, congratulations on your second place today, and we look forward to seeing how you get on at Monza in a week's time.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
All the best. So here and there from our last interview of this evening, Paul Scott from the GT3 Silver Class NXTGEN Racing Oranges driver, finishing P2 in the end. And it was interesting to hear with regards to the dynamic between himself and Daniel Stimmon, the GT3 bronze winner in the end, about how Paul decided to sit behind the Mercedes driver initially until he saw that Ollie Wayne was fast approaching. And it was almost as if it was a hurry-up call to say, no, now you've got to push and you can't fuel save anymore. And I think it's that. Plus also, and when I say short-sightedness here, is not to besmirch Paul's reputation, but in terms of what is his racing, as he said, they became fixated with the racing against Ollie Wayne, and the two of them in the end, I think both became so obsessed with trying to beat one another on circuit that they both realised in the end they were actually not able to do a two-stop, whereas the majority of the GT3 field were able to do so. So interesting to see how their race in the end created its own strategic dilemma, which they both had to overcome, and in that small little incident between them, and also it was Paul Williams coming through over the brow through turn number 4 on that final lap, just upsetting the balance of Paul's car by the sounds of things and causing him to lose out in the run through Tech Rouge and eventually lose out on the win on the battle of straight line speed down the Mulsanne. But I think we're going to see plenty more battles like that with the rounds remaining, of course, and indeed next week's venue on Monza, a straight line speed circuit, and I think we might be seeing Paul Scott really having to battle against the elements in order to bring home the potential win. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our final interview of today. And you've heard from our 4 interviewees, starting from the top of Artie and Costa Chatsconstantu in the G3 bronze class, the privateers first in the number 22 car, the BMW M4 that is. And then we heard from Barrie Jarman in the LMP2 number 8 SCCR SimSports machine, before then coming on to a penultimate interview of the number 75 G3 bronze driver of Daniel Stimmon from Rossum's Universal Robots. And lastly, we just heard from the 85 driver of Paul Scott in the G3 Silver class for NXTGEN Racing Orange. Congratulations to all of them for their race results today, and we do appreciate them joining us in the interview room. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude today's show, and it is now time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed the show and you want to know more about the NXTGEN racing community, whether it be in terms of our leagues or alternatively what we do off the simulated track, indeed on the real world motorsporting track with multiple members of our administration team working as motorsporting marshals week in, week out, we can always go to our official website. It's nextgenracing.co.uk, where you can find out all the information with current and upcoming series and everything in between. Alternatively, if you're on Facebook, you can of course go to our Facebook group, and that is facebook.com/groups/NXTGEN Racing. But as we now look ahead, of course, our drivers have been able to survive the test of Le Mans, and now they'll be taking on the charge under the Temple of the Speed, which is round number 8, Monza Grand Prix. And we'll be heading there on Wednesday, the 15th of March 2023, and with only 3 rounds left, points now become ever critical as we head into the closing stages of the championship campaign. But the question is, after the run of consistency and calmness at Le Mans, which has boded our drivers well, who is going to be the master of scintillating speed to bring it on home at the Monza GP circuit? We'll find out all that and more in a week's time, but until then, we've been NXTGEN Racing. I've been your host and commentator, Paul TX141 Walsh, also known as Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, but most importantly, remember to stay on track. Good night.